Caitlin, do you think we'd have a good time going to Disney World together?
Yeah. Oh my God. Yes.
We would be a very good Disney pairing.
Yeah. I feel like it might be the kind of situation where we'd be really annoying for other people that were with us.
Oh, no, I just mean that's why it would just have just you and I.
Yeah. It would
Right?
be a great, like, we would have a great time.
We'd get our money's worth, I think.
100%.
Because we would stop at every sconce. Every
sconce.
brick.
Yeah, and be like, Disney himself painted this one.
Right.
I don't think that he did that.
No, but we could kind of run in a secret tour for people.
Oh, and like charge them under the table.
Maybe we're lying, but I think they would have fun.
Probably.
Like we know enough, but we also have enough confidence where we could just blow past the stuff we don't know. We're
showmen.
And fill in the blanks.
Much like the great Walt Disney himself, we have a natural gift for storytelling and an undeniable charisma.
That's why I guess we keep coming back to the wonderful world of Disney.
Yeah, that's our fave. Unproblematic.
Okay, so today, I don't know what do you call this type of episode? Are we doing a ride through? Are we doing the Haunted Mansion ride through right now?
I don't know.
Like, are we?
Yes?
Yeah, but there's more to it.
I mean, I trust your judgment on that.
Okay.
I guess we'll see, won't we?
So I think we need to, so here's the plan. This is all new. This is like totally new structure. This isn't cartoon feelings. This is like extra bonus feelings.
Just feelings.
So
I've been having a hard time lately.
Okay. We're here to talk about the Haunted Mansion as like a big picture idea, like a mastercraft of storytelling and vibe.
Oh my God, it's such
more
a vibe.
though,
yeah,
right?
A mastercraft of vibe.
Yeah. And the story of the Haunted Mansion exists in real time in that you can go to a haunted mansion, different places around the world, and experience it. But before we get there, I think we need to talk about the whole story that gets us to the Haunted Mansion. So while picture you and I, we got off the airplane, we kind of boarded the bus, the free bus that takes you from like the Orlando airport to Walt Disney World. We're in Florida, by the way, in case you're wondering.
But yeah.
Oh, are they?
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, time stamping.
Yeah.
Well, for now, they still have buses. And we're waiting like in the parking lot. And you and I were talking about the Haunted Mansion, but we haven't entered the park yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the only reason we're here.
Yeah,
we're going to leave as soon as we're done.
Yeah. So the story of the Haunted Mansion goes back to 1951. So we're at this. Disney's made a bunch of great films. We've seen all of them. We love them. But the whole project is kind of expanded into theme parks. And thus we get the newly formed Imagineers. And a lot of these guys are like rollovers from the animation departments, right? Like some of our boys, we got like Mark Davis in there.
Yeah, we got some of the 9 old men.
Yeah. We got, we got like Ken Anderson. He's a good guy. We've got Cloud Coates. I don't know if he must go back all the way, I'm thinking.
I will say, in my research of this, there are a lot of names associated with the Haunted Mansion, at least that I was not familiar with.
Yeah. I pulled out a few of the big ones. So we got those three guys. Ken Anderson, he's like the main early sketch guy from early on, beginning as far back as 1951. I think they date sketches to him. And we'll get to fill in the blanks with the rest of these guys later. But of course, Mark Davis, an icon, he's kind of the humorous side. We've got Cloud Coates, who is more of the background, setting the scene in the darker side of things. And a couple other names I pulled. Raleigh Crump, because he's just really fun. And he kind of has a hand in this. And then I have Yale Gacy, who is kind of the magician of it all. Like he actually was literally a magician at, the Magic Castle in LA. Wow. Have you ever gone there?
No, but I'm aware of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he is like from that school of magician.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Right. It all actually, doing the research on this, it all makes sense, which makes sense because that's how history goes once you start to look at it.
Yeah. If there's any sense to be had.
But, I guess before we go any further, maybe we can talk about our feelings about the Haunted Mansion. I love it. And I was happy to do this. So like, do you remember like the first time you heard about the Haunted Mansion or went there? Or?
I don't remember the first time I heard about it. I've talked multiple times, I think, on this podcast and just in life in general about how like Disney World was this like North Star for me for a long time as a kid. Because it was like, we're going to go. Like, we're going this year. And we never went. And I didn't go for the first time until I was 19. I spent my entire childhood just being like, it is the coolest place on the planet. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if I'd say it's the coolest place on the planet, but it's pretty cool, pretty good. And my mom had gone when she was a kid, and she had a special relationship with the Haunted Mansion, and that it like gave her nightmares pretty significantly as a child. So she used to tell that story, but it was kind of like in an affectionate way. Like she didn't bear a grudge to the Haunted Mansion. So it was just sort of just something I was always aware of, and something that's like, like someday when I go, I'll get to ride on the Haunted Mansion.
Yeah.
And then I finally did.
I wonder, that's interesting to think about how, like, for an earlier generation, it might have been scarier than it, like, as time goes on, it gets more campy.
Yes,
right? It's not as scary.
And specifically, she said, which is so fun, because I had no awareness of this, and, like, as I was riding the ride, I was waiting to get to the end to see it, because it was specifically the tiny little woman at the very end of the ride that's talking to you. And I think she has some kind of like rear projection face or something, like a video component, and she's just making little like puns or whatever. And Mom was just like, and she doesn't get freaked out by stuff really like that. So that was just a very memorable story. And for some reason that just really didn't work for her. But it was really cool to ride that ride and be like, oh, that's like the same thing. Like that you saw.
Yeah.
When you were a kid, like 40 years ago or whatever, however long it was. I'm not good at math.
That's kind of like the magic of all this Disney stuff now, in a way, is that it's exactly, in a lot of ways, the same as it was for another generation, which is like a very specific type of nostalgia that can really only exist in something that can afford to be so controlled, I guess. Because like you can go back to your high school and you can go on the playground, but it's probably been updated or demolished or the school's closed, right? But like Disney, you can always go back and it's that.
The school never closes at Disney.
No. And this is kind of Disney school for us. I would say my feelings are the same, other than it goes back a lot earlier for me because I grew up in Daytona Beach outside of Orlando, and I was able to go a couple times when I was a kid. So when I think about my dad and my mom being on those rides, you know, it's like also me as a kid being there too. So that's kind of like another level of enrichment, and you get more for your money. Again, you know, that's important. The economics of the whole thing. So,
people would say that.
So now we've set the stage for how we feel about the Haunted Mansion. Surprised we both like it, and we're happy to be back here today with all of you listeners out there.
All of the many thousands.
Okay, early 1950s. Ken is hard at work on sketches for what might become some sort of Haunted Mansion walkthrough. There is no sense of the greater ambitions of this, the ride as it is now. It was basically just like a scary house walkthrough in early planning images for Disneyland and then later Disney World. So Walt always did want the trope of the haunted house somewhere in his original conception of Disneyland, but it took a long time to get there, basically. Right. And there's even that sign. Have you seen a photograph of the original Haunted Mansion sign? Like they build the facade and then they put this like cool bat kind of Tim Burton looking sign up that's cool like, here's what's going to be here, like eventually, building anticipation.
Yeah, they announced it super early, didn't they? And then it didn't come. Well, it didn't come out until he died.
Yeah.
Like it didn't actually happen until it died. Yeah, until he died.
Which is pretty spooky.
Oh my God.
Okay, so we've talked about the Imagineers a little bit, and just like this idea of this beginning of this whole industry that grows out of cartoon art is just kind of like a cool thing. So Walt Disney's company, what is it? Like Walter Elias
Disney. It's just, I think it's his dad's initials.
Yeah, and that's the name of the company when it begins, right?
Yeah,
so
WED.
That's like sort of the incorporation of Disney's plan to build what will eventually become the Imagineers. But at this point, it's just kind of like a group of guys walking around with their white shirts tucked in, skinny black ties, kind of NASA looking, turning cartoon stories into like 3D spaces. It's just like a great kind of mashup of magic arts and visual narrative, like cinema, like all these pieces of all these different art forms together, right? So the original Haunted Mansion doesn't really fit into the plan for Disney when it first opens. And then in the early 1960s, the Imagineers kind of shift gears into the New York World's Fair. So like the idea of the Haunted Mansion gets bumped even further back, but there's still like all these sketches hanging around these Ken Anderson sketches. And even probably like at this point, maybe there's some Mark Davis stuff in there too.
Yeah, like at this point, they've been thinking about it for 10 years.
Right. It's like just a big pile of stuff, right? Script notes, like phrases, illusions, skulls, headless things, swampy trees.
Super spooky.
Yeah.
Really. Very frightening.
Do you have any like concept art that kind of strikes your fancy that you can like picture? I can picture this really early Ken Anderson one that's just a bunch of kind of like dangling, like ragged clothing, like draped ghosts. It's like done in gouache on like black paper with like light paint. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, you showed me that book. Actually, I feel like this is such a cop-out answer, but I love the posters basically they had for all these Disney rides back in the day. Yeah. So if you Google like vintage Disney ride poster, you'll find there's one for like Dumbo or even for like Fantasyland and like Frontierland and stuff. There's a bunch of these different ones. Mm-hmm. But the Haunted Mansion one is really nice. I think it has the hitchhiking ghosts on it.
Right.
Like the three standing there in front of this. Like it's a very stark kind of image of the house. But I just love that one.
Yeah, it's like a 3 or 4 color like screen print.
Yeah, it's super simple.
Yeah.
But there's just something about it that you're like, yes.
And it's that great. Like the whole idea of the Haunted Mansion is to kind of like throw off kilter the magic and safety of what the rest of the Magic Kingdom is. And even it's right there in that poster, the way it's like all secondary colors. It's like kind of a pumpkin-y orange and like a weird green.
Mossy green.
Yeah, it's so good. And just so different than, you know, the Cinderella, the blues and the yellows.
You might die here.
You could die.
You could die.
Yeah. And at this point, if you walked into the facade, you might die because there is no ride there yet. It's just like a wall.
Nothing.
No.
A hole.
Yeah. A big sand pit and maybe a bulldozer or two hanging out. Okay. So, you know, we have this kind of leveling up of the Imagineers when they get tied to the New York World's Fair, because that's where they build It's a Small World ride, and these rides that have to kind of be portable, but also be a little bit bigger and better than stuff that's part of the original Disneyland, because all those guys come back, like Raleigh Crump, these guys come back with bigger ideas and visions that can actually make the Haunted Mansion come to life. So there's some key components like mechanical wise and I guess like illusion wise that they get from, like, for example, Ford had a ride that was like a car, like on a track that kind of becomes in a way a little bit like what the Doom buggies become in terms of like kind of making an entertaining story on a track.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that's where like People Movers came from that World's Fair.
Exactly.
And then the Omni Mover, which is the Doom buggy, came from the People Mover.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all in a tech evolution, basically, right? Very engineering. We should get an engineer on here sometime, I guess, to really just dry out the show.
Imagineer on here.
Oh, that would make more sense.
That would be really cool.
I'm thinking just a local engineer to just get out some schematics.
I mean, we could try it. Don't expect to see that one, folks.
I bet we can find an Imagineer. It can't be that hard.
Yeah, I'll go to linkedin.com.
That could possibly be a place where we can network with some people.
I'm going to type in, show me the magic, and I'll just contact the first 3 people that come up.
I know we're laughing here, but in 1966, Walt Disney passed away.
And it wasn't funny.
No, too much smoking. I think that was the problem.
It was, yes. I guess he had just chain smoked. Like, I think he was living a high stress lifestyle at that point in his life.
Yeah. Yeah. Too much ambition. Let Walt Disney be a lesson to all of you out there. Just don't try so
Don't smoke.
Don't try so hard. Yeah. Don't smoke. Don't try so hard.
Cool. Don't do drugs. And yeah, like, don't work. Don't work if you can.
Yeah. Don't
do
build.
It.
We have all the things we could possibly need. We have the Haunted Mansion. We have the internet connection you're listening to this on. We have Adobe Audacity, which is recording the software.
It's actually Audition. Sorry, Adobe.
But you get what
yeah.
The point is, we have everything we could possibly need. So just relax, all of you.
That's true. I'm smoking a cigarette right now.
So Walt Disneyland contains New Orleans Square, right out in sunny California. We've got New Orleans Square is the location of the original haunted house. So that opens in 1969 to great applause and fanfare by all the young 60s goths I guess. They were still called Gothics at that point.
Were they?
I don't know.
Gothics is actually way cooler than just goths. No offense to the goths listening.
And now we're here today to mostly talk about what becomes the Walt Disney World ride, because personally, that's the one I'm most familiar with. Caitlin, actually, but you've been on the Disneyland one. I never have.
I am not sure, which makes me think that I have been to Disneyland 3 times, all in the same summer. And I went to Disneyland proper once, because there's also like the California, I think it's California Adventure, I think is what it's called.
Yeah, you're right.
But that one had cooler roller coasters and stuff, so I went to that one mostly. So I'm not sure I actually made it on the original, and I feel like I would remember if I did, so I don't think we rode it.
Okay.
R.I.P. But I have been on the Disney World one multiple times.
Yeah.
And I do it again.
Hell yeah. Well,
try and stop me.
In a way, we will be tonight.
That's so true.
So 69, the Disneyland opens in New York's, the Disneyland Haunted Mansion opens in New Orleans Square. And then in 1971, so they're being built and constructed roughly at the same time. In 71, we get the Liberty Square one. And that actually is like a pretty significant difference, that we go from the setting of New Orleans Square to Liberty Square, which we'll get into a bit. So a little more engineering talk. So these Imagineers at this point, as they kind of build up to make the Haunted Mansion, things that they've done that are great already. They have the Tiki Room. Love it.
Never.
Oh, never. You didn't go in a Tiki
cool.
Room?
It seems cool. No, we never did.
This is one of those things where I know that I'm old and I'm like, oh, the charm of kind of like 50s Tiki culture is kind of a dated thing that probably like mostly went out with like the swing revival of the 90s. Like, I'm aware. I get it. But the Tiki Room is very charming and cute.
I would love to.
Like,
don't get me wrong. I hear everything. Like, there's a lot of stuff I don't approve of.
Yeah.
Exactly in the way that you're saying. But like, I'd love to see it as a relic of Disney. And for some ungodly reason, we've just never done it.
Yeah.
But I love birds. I love animatronic birds. I'd love to see them in person. It's
great. It's a great, so you sit on the floor and the stage comes from above and different scenes are illuminated by lights. So this whole scene is out at one time, but it draws your attention with lights, which is very clever. Things that hold it back, and you can see them evolve these ideas, are the mechanical elements are quite noisy. Like, you can hear the birds' beaks as they're singing, which is like charming, but not ideal, right? Things that they solve a little later when we get to things like the Haunted Mansion, where it's like a pretty quiet, the illusion is quite complete, you know? All right. Tiki Room. How about this? Another great, Imagineer invention is the Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln. Have you done that one?
Yes, I have done that one.
Oh, I haven't. What's that
I had to think of boring, kind of. Oh, God, that sounds shitty.
Like, what do you do? I don't even know. I just have it on the list.
I don't think you do anything. Oh, I'm looking it up. Oh, yeah. No, it's like he just talks at you. Do
you, like, stand there? Or you sit with him? Or are you at a table?
I don't know. I don't remember. Maybe we didn't do it. So, in which case, I'm pretty sure you're in a stage room, like, with, like, stadium seating, though. Or,
okay.
like, yeah. And yeah. It's not, it's of its time.
Right.
Like, it's not.
It's like too much history and not enough entertainment.
So yeah, I do kind of, this is sort of a tangent, I guess, but the whole like president, like colonialism zone of Disney World is kind of boring to me.
Well, sure.
The restaurant is okay. And also they had this really fun Muppets show where they would sing out the windows. And like,
right.
But then they got rid of that recently.
Yeah.
So I did get to enjoy that in person once. It was really nice, but yeah, it's just not memorable.
I think the best thing to take away from all that really boring stuff and like dated stuff is that the Imagineers learned a lot about how to like build
that's
cool
what's
robots.
Unfortunate about me being so dismissive about it is like it is literally the history of all the stuff that they did.
Yeah, it's great tech in a boring package.
It's just like it's so dated at this point.
Yeah.
But can you really fault it for that?
No. Okay, now something dated but still good is the Pirates of the Caribbean. So that ride comes before.
Mm-hmm.
Great transition into like the dark ride concept and these big staged scenes that like make you feel like you're just somewhere completely different, which is cool.
Yeah. I do. I think Pirates of, like, I can understand maybe a kid getting on Pirates of the Caribbean now and being kind of like, but I feel like that one is still very charming.
Yeah.
Even though I do find it very discordant that they have the Johnny Depp Jack Sparrow character
go.
like prominently featured in
Just
it.
Take it out.
Now and he's like much nicer than the other models as well. So
right,
like the technological leap is so apparent. But there's like the part where you're going through and it opens up and you're like in the middle of a ship battle with two ships like firing their cannons across from each other, and I'm like, this rules. Like, because you're like in a dark dungeon, whatever, but it's like you're supposed to be seeing like the sky. It's like very fun.
If you're paying attention, like, sure, if you're on your phone or you're doing something else and you're not committed, it's gonna maybe be boring.
You need to get into the happiest place mindset.
Yeah, like
if
you're paying attention when you come around the bend into that room, like it should capture your imagination. Like
it's fun. It's super fun.
Yeah.
I'd do it again.
Yeah.
Somebody send me to Disney World.
That's what we're working towards here. Okay, so Pirates of the Caribbean, a couple other things that kind of build a skill set here. It's a Small World ride, of course. This sort of just whimsical adventure around this world of tiny geometric Mary Blair people. Then the Carousel of Progress is also kind of a big Imagineering leap. The way have you done the Carousel of Progress? Where it's like the stage moves and you stay in place. That's pretty cool. That's a very cool idea.
Yeah, that's like a unique, I mean, maybe not now in this day and age, but like for what it was, that is evidence of, I think, people having a lot of fun at work, I would assume.
Mm-hmm. And making something, there's also this bigger idea for the parks as a whole, like these idea that rides like, what do they call them? Like people eaters. So it's like, if your park is at capacity, how do you get people into spaces in air conditioned rooms out of the way of just people navigating the park itself? Something like Carousel of Progress or Pirates, the ride, the turnover rate on that ride is like extremely high. So that's part of like the bigger goal of a lot of these rides. Yeah, just getting people in to danger and out as fast as possible.
100% magic. You see it, it's gone.
Yeah, 7 minutes, you're out of there.
Get a Dole Whip, go home.
It's wild how short some of these rides are. Like the Haunted Mansion is like an 8-minute ride, but doesn't it feel like so much more?
Yeah, I think it really is because, so right before we started recording, you pulled up like an interior map of the Haunted Mansion, and I was like, whoa, like I feel like I shouldn't be seeing this, because if you go in, I just lose like any sense of direction, which is kind of part of it by design. They do the whole like, you're in this strange room where you can't get out of it, and and then you go in, but just like all the twisting and the turning and stuff, like I don't know which way I'm going at this point.
No.
So this Haunted Mansion could be huge. Like it just feels like it's this mess, and there's parts where you're like outside. Yeah. So there's a lot going on. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it doesn't feel like it's so short to me.
Yeah, right. It's such a compressed story like that. There's something that is so inspiring about like these people that can take like this big idea and squish it down into such a tiny experience in a way. Like, movies are that. It's like, well, here's 2 hours, but you get so much out of a good movie.
You are forever changed.
Yeah. And like Haunted Mansion, in a way, like when you come out, you're not forever changed, but when you come out of that 8 minutes,
you have a ghost with you.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you have that ghost forever. So you're cursed. But also, like, aren't you a little kind of off kilter? Like something, you're fluttery a little bit, or like it's not like a roller coaster. It's like a different type of feeling, right?
No, it's literally, I would liken it to the feeling of coming out of a movie. If you ever go to see a movie and it's early and you walk out and you're expecting it to be dark out and it's not, that's what it feels like.
Yeah.
Which is crazy for something that is only 8 minutes. But yeah, you're like, all right.
Right.
Let's go get a Dole Whip.
Yeah. Okay. So, this other facility, that's part of WED that I had never heard of, but it keeps popping up in like discussion of the Haunted Mansion. And because this is a bonus episode where I feel like we can just talk about every little dumb thing.
Yeah.
There's this facility called MAPO. Did you come across that acronym? MAPO?
Could you go on, please, while I cogitate on that?
In 1965, on the Glendale campus of Disney, they opened this production house that focuses exclusively on audio and animatronics technology. And it's like leftover funding from what the WED enterprise. And they build like this design and effects department, which I imagine is kind of a little bit like ILM or something. But it's a facility that they call MAPO. And like they worked on Mary Poppins and stuff.
Hence the name, which I just Googled.
Oh, shit. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mappo. It's like Mary Poppins. Yeah.
Oh, is it? Okay.
So I was like, what does it stand for? And I think the only, I might have heard of it from, well, if you haven't seen it, you should watch it. The Imagineering series they have on Disney Plus. Because it is really, it's like Disney propaganda, obviously, but it's really good. Like there's a lot of fun stuff in there. And even about like other parks in other countries, like ones that I haven't been to, like the Haunted Mansion in, I think it's in like Hong Kong is like way different.
Oh yeah,
than the ones we have here, which is just really cool to find out stuff like that. I think they might have some Mappo history in that.
Yeah. Yeah. I just love the letter Mappo is just a cute little word.
Yeah, it sounds like an adorable little, honestly, it makes me think of like a maple syrup robot. I don't know if that's nothing, but
sure.
They could have made one easily.
Yeah. Okay. Let's look back at, the team that puts this whole project together. So there, of course there's all kinds of fandom around Haunted Mansion. Maybe it's the most famous Disney ride, you think?
Probably,
I don't know, in terms of like what people like the aesthetic, everybody loves it.
And it's one that I found that like tremendous nerds like you or I, for example, gravitate to.
Yeah.
And like I met a guy at a Camograph a couple years ago that had a patterned shirt on, and I was like, that looks really familiar. Is that the wallpaper from the Haunted Mansion? He was like, yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, hell yeah, that's awesome. So it's that. There's just something about the aesthetic of it and even like deep cuts like that people really like.
Yeah, it's so packed with little details that just can be iconic if you want them to be. Whereas some of the other
you don't
rides,
have to know that it's Haunted Mansion.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not putting all my cards out there for everybody to see.
So the people that made this grand thing that's been merchandised to death, I kind of listed them off already, right? With Ken Anderson, our main sketch guy, Mark Davis, Claude Coates, Yale Gracie, and Raleigh Crump. And then also, we have to talk about Paul Frees, who...
Oh my God. Let's please talk about Paul Frees.
So his voice, he's our ghost host, right? Like he's the voice.
To the Haunted Mansion. I am your host, your ghost host.
So Paul Frees pops up a couple places, though, because he's also a voice in Pirates of the Caribbean, and he's also part of the Hall of Presidents.
Wow.
Yeah, so he's been around. Now, somebody I didn't mention earlier is, because I have trouble saying his name, so you can help me here. This guy is like, I guess, considered the show writer. So this is Atencio.
I think that is very close to being correct, yeah.
I feel like...
And that's the letter X, just for people who are
it's so cool.
Atencio.
I'm getting a bit of deja vu. I feel like I might have brought him up, or we have brought him up on a previous episode in some way or other.
Maybe, because I feel like I found him for the first time when I was researching this, and I don't know why. I feel like I would have retained that.
Oh, really?
Name.
I can picture myself stumbling over that last name. But, all right, so X he's the guy that comes in the 60s when they're like, all right, here's the piles of stuff. Here's the concept art. Here's the illusions. Here's some notes on how we can like make the shadow figure work. Here's some like characters we're going to do. Here's some backstory. And X had to craft this all into some sort of cohesive ride. So there's like a bit of narrative, even no matter how loose it is, that holds this whole world together, because so much of the Haunted Mansion is kind of foreshadowing what's going to come in a way. Like there is a story, the story when you say it out loud kind of sucks, but there is a sense that things have happened here in an order, right? So this guy puts it all together. You could kind of describe the tour of the Haunted Mansion a bit as a 3-act structure. You have the anticipation scenes early that begin in the graveyard outside the mansion that lead you in. And this comes right up into Madame Leota's seance chamber. And then we like literally turn a quarter into that main hall. And that's like our act 2. And then after we come out of the attic, then the graveyard jamboree, that's our act 3.
And we love it.
And we love all of it.
We're having a great time.
Yeah. Each scene, I guess you can have your favorites. We can kind of talk about like what's the best parts of this ride.
Tag
and what
yourself
maybe
which
like,
ghost are you.
Yeah. But it's just really interesting to think it being like the Cartoons Feeling Show. Like I feel like talking about this ride in particular is so much about like how Disney constructs narratives or how their team works together, whether it's a movie or a ride. It's just so interesting to see how they figure this stuff out when there's no president.
Yeah, it's like
President?
literally there's no president in the Hall of Presidents. the animatronics have come to life.
Like, what's the precedent?
Precedent.
Like, what's the spelling of that?
Precedent.
The C. Okay.
Precedent.
I have a lot of trouble with words. I love using them, but
I was a runner-up the state spelling bee in Oklahoma in 8th
Oh, really?
grade. So if I hadn't gotten Catullian wrong, I would have gone to nationals. So
Holy
I'm just
shit.
saying I'm a subpar, but still quite advanced speller.
I would have been like, I'm like the custodian that cleans up after the spelling bee and like gathers the brochures and like puts them in those.
Can't read these.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we've got the Disney team together. Let's jump out of that for a minute into just this bigger idea of dark ride. This is something I dug into, which is kind of cool. It's funny how regional to where you and I are, the Haunted Mansion suddenly becomes, not only in the context of where it is set in the park, which is like Upper Hudson Valley, which we'll get to. Caitlin and I, don't come to our house.
Please don't.
But we are in the Hudson Valley area.
Yeah.
Which is
adjacent,
mid upstate New York, like moving. We're not downstate. We're not like the place where rich people in New York City live. We're like the part up above
We're
that.
Further than that.
Yeah, but we're not northern New York. We're not like near Lake Ontario.
Status.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll get to how all that adds up later. But dark ride history. There's this ride from the 50s created by the Pretzel Dark Ride Company. And Pretzel was a company that really, I don't know if they're the first, but at the time they were the best builder of these dark rides. And you get like the first iteration of a haunted house ride with them. And it's still here in Sylvan Beach Amusement Park, which is kind of like slightly more upstate, like going towards Syracuse. Like I remember going there when I was a little kid, back when I lived way in northern New York. So Laughland has this dark ride that's just kind of described as, it says Laughland, but it also says like haunts and laughs together. So it's pitched to the riders as like a thing you're going to get scared on and laugh at the same time. So Pretzel, the dark ride company, builds this really janky kind of track system where you get in like a 2 or 3 person wide car in the front. You know, you put your ticket in, hand it to the creepy guy, and you go through that like set of doors, and there's like usually a demon face on it, right? And then you're kind of like weaving and wobbling through this like track that goes backstage for a while. And every time you turn a bend, there's like an illuminated prop, right? It'll be like a witch, maybe a cauldron if they have the money for it. Or like, I did the ride through of this specific Laughland ride, and there's just like masks in kind of like chicken wire boxes so nobody can reach in and grab them, which kind of breaks the illusion. Yeah. But also there's a haunt in it that kind of throws it off because you're looking at werewolves and mummies and like, you know, off-brand Draculas, and suddenly car headlights come right at you. It's like, that's too real.
Stephen King.
Just like a 50s Jeep coming at you.
Like werewolves can drive Jeeps.
Yeah, it just felt a little too real.
Draculas can drive Jeeps, no problem.
That's true. In fact, in Transylvania, you can get your license at 12 years old.
Not a joke, just a fact.
Yep. So this Laughland pretzel ride, I don't know if Disney goes on it or like it's a thing that him and other Imagineers would have seen as a kid. But this becomes the origin of what eventually turns into the ride of the Haunted Mansion. Because if you look back at the Ken Anderson sketches, you have this narrative of a sea captain and like a vengeful bride and all this stuff and all these rooms and hosts and ravens that speak and billowy curtains and thunderstorms.
It's honestly
It's a lot, but it's a walkthrough, right? Have you seen like some of the old drawings? Yeah. So the problem with that is that if you're trying to move a bunch of people through a ride, like people are either hanging out too long or moving too quickly.
You don't want it to be a stand through.
Ouch.
Like,
yeah.
Move along.
Right. So you can just see it like as this idea of Disneyland being this place which reaches like, you know, 1 million attendants in its first month or something crazy. You can't have people just at their own whims on these rides.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. They have to be put in a box and moved very specifically.
They must be herded.
Yeah. In and out. So we're going to bring this dark ride into the concept of the Haunted Mansion. So we have the mansion as a general idea, and now we inject what becomes like the Doom Buggy thing, which is a cool name for something.
It's a hilarious name for it.
Yeah, it's fun. It's cute, but it's scary.
I watched a ride through on youtube.com, and the ride has like a breakdown in the middle, basically, where all the cars stop, and there's a little voiceover being like, sorry, we're being like momentarily haunted or whatever, to just be like, something broke or whatever, like, please don't get up.
Yeah.
But he keeps going, stay in your doom buggy.
Yeah.
And he says it like 3 times.
Yeah, it makes a meal out of it.
Every single time. It can't go by unnoticed. He was like, everybody knows how clever of a name that is.
And once we get into the ride, we can really appreciate the way that ride mechanic basically functions like, it's almost like the body of a camera and you are inside behind the lens, and it's like pointing you at every scene. Yeah. Right? And for as long as you need to be looking at it, and then shifting you to the next thing. Which is,
nobody talks about, all this content I consume about the mechanics of the Haunted Mansion. But I always thought it was really fascinating that it also helps you not really notice the other people. Because when you get on those buggies, you're pretty close to the people in front of you and behind you. And there will be times where you're like turning a corner and you like make eye contact with somebody that's like turning around the other way. Mm-hmm. But it is nice because sometimes you'll just see the back, like the black back of these things as you're going around, and it sort of gives you more of the illusion that you're hanging out kind of in a small group.
Yeah. It's like, when you build a 2-dimensional composition, you like consider framing and stuff, but like to think about framing a scene in this way, it's just so complicated that it's crazy that it's so as immersive as it is.
Yeah, right? It's fun. Yeah. In a way, I wonder if it's even better at that. Like, you could almost have less stuff going. There's a lot of stuff going on in the Haunted Mansion. Yeah. But you could get away with having a little bit less stuff because it's going to point you at something. So you're like, I should pay attention to that.
Yeah.
So you're not just like, okay, I've taken in everything that's in this room and now I'm bored. Like, you don't get a chance to really do that.
Yeah, totally. And there are conversations amidst the Imagineers early on about how complicated a room will be in terms of like, what are our focal points? And it's like, do we need the wallpaper here? No. Yes. Like navigating that, like overfilling a space or creating a cluster in a corner, like all this stuff. You could really just go to art school on a study of the Haunted Mansion, I think.
And you should.
And you all should.
Get a PhD in the Haunted Mansion.
What if that's what we're doing? Are we building curriculum towards a...
Oh my God. Somebody, I'd love to retire to a cozy professorship just teaching about the Walt Disney. It's a little too corporate. I don't know. We'll talk about this later.
Okay. Okay, so dark rides, concept art, all these things coming together. I want to throw a bunch of... So we know Disney... It's not like the idea of a haunted mansion, the scary part of Disney World comes out of nowhere, because it has been there from the beginning, right? Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, iconic horror scene in it, right? Pinocchio, great,
terrifying, actually, not in a sarcastic way.
Yeah. Night on Bald Mountain.
Really cool.
Peak horror. Yeah.
I guess scary. I don't know. I thought it was awesome.
But like beautiful, horror, right? Not like scary, but just,
kind of operatic.
Yeah. And then even you could even say like some of Dumbo, like the psychedelic nature of it is very uncomfortable.
I was terrified by the scene where he has to like jump out of the burning building or whatever.
Yeah, Ugh. Exactly. Ugh. Right. So we have all the pieces, like all these artists are not, like when I feel like a lot, this is changing now, but when I was a kid and I'm like, I love Disney, but then when you look at Disney fans, it's like, I have a Mickey Mouse shirt. Isn't it a great time here? I'm like, there's some dark shit behind the scenes of like the way these people think and the stuff they have to do for their jobs.
Yeah.
Don't celebrate it with like your Minnie Mouse like t-shirt.
You don't know anything about this.
You don't know what it's like to be dark.
You ever suffered for your art? No.
So I'm glad we're seeing like the Haunted Mansion come forward as like the dominant vibe of like what Disneyland represents and the Disney thing. It's like, if you're going to make art, you got some like dark, weird shit that you're trying to get out.
Yeah. Open your vein. Reveal yourself to the world.
Now, beyond that first batch of Golden Age, I guess this kind of fits in Golden Age, but by the time we get to like 1949, creeping up into the region of where the Haunted Mansion will reside, we get the double feature. kind of post-war, trying to save money. Let's put out 2 movies together just to see what happens. Adventures of Ichabod Crane and Mr. Toad, right?
Yes.
Have you seen that pairing?
Yes.
Yeah.
A long time ago, honestly, because I sort of remember vaguely about. I've seen the Mr. Toad one a little more recently, because I think that one's pretty accessible on Disney Plus, and the Ichabod. I just know that's like the Headless Horseman vibe. And I did go on. I think they might have taken it out, but they had the Mr. Toad like ride at Disneyland.
Yeah,
and I did go on that.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, because
cool.
some of those there's an Alice in Wonderland ride there that is just ancient, and it's like nothing is happening inside. And I have a really like a soft spot for that movie. So I'm riding through and whatever, and it's just like a black light painting of like the caterpillar. Like it's that kind of, that's like literally it. Nothing else is happening.
It's like version 1.
Yeah, because it's like they didn't have any of the other stuff yet. So that's what it was. It's kind of cool.
It's interesting to see how far they came in like the 2015-ish years between that and like what the Haunted Mansion is, and how timeless Haunted Mansion can be, and how kind of, I guess like you said, it can be dated, but it's not dated in the same way as like those rides you're describing.
Yeah, but I do hope we talk about too. I actually didn't realize until this, somehow brain deadedly didn't realize this, but there are like things that they've done to update it since then that are pretty significant. And not to like totally change the subject, but just the first one that I was like, yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, was that in the original iteration, Madame Leota was just in like a stationary crystal ball. And now, and they had changed this, at least a few years before I went for the first time. Like it hovers up and down.
Right.
Kind of. And they have a different projection system going on inside of it. But I remember thinking when I was there, like, holy shit, like, how did they do this? They didn't do that. So sometimes the magic is not what you think. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Berenstain Bears like memory thing. It's like, was this as weird as I thought? But yeah, we will go through room by room and try to like remember and pick out some of these changes, because there's a lot. Try to maintain the history of it, and then also like incorporating newer media, but not making it look weird in that Johnny Depp way. Yeah. Right. So
actually haunted.
So, Adventures of Ichabod Crane in this Mr. Toad movie, they kind of paint this picture of like sinister weirdness paired with campiness and silly character design, and that Mark Davis, Cloud Coates type of mashup that this ride actually is, right? Because when that's like the main thing to take away from all this is it's two kind of not competing, but like very different personality types that are trying to tell like one story. And that's why like the mansion feels like kind of odd when it transitions to like goofier things from scary stuff, right? And I feel like some of this Disney content, like mid-century Disney, kind of like falls in that same realm as well. Because I used to watch The Adventures of Ichabod Crane a lot as a kid. It has some like really dark, like noir-y looking great shadowy moments with the Headless Horseman. But then a lot of the Ichabod stuff earlier on is just so silly.
Isn't it like kind of slapsticky?
Yeah, and he's not likable either.
It's like hapless,
it's a weird character. Like kids like don't care about Ichabod.
Nothing in common.
He's like a school teacher and he's weird. Like
I hate weird school teachers. That sucks.
And he's new. He's like basically the substitute. He like comes into town out of nowhere.
He was doomed from the start.
Yeah. So, okay. All right. I'm going to throw a bunch of, this is a literary corner here because I feel like we have to talk about some of the stuff that influences like the tropes that become the Haunted Mansion, because the Haunted Mansion is basically like a Ready Player One of like horror.
Don't say that.
Sorry. It is kind of a bunch of stuff in a way, though.
Yeah,
right?
That does make sense.
Okay, first and foremost, it is Edgar Allan Poe, like in that there is like a literal raven.
I've heard of him. Yes, I've heard tell of this man.
Have you ever read Fall of the House of Usher? Do you ever? Do
no,
that story?
I haven't read. No.
Okay, it's about. Can I spoil it? Are you going to read it?
Fine.
It's about it.
Probably not. Go ahead.
It's about a New England house that an unnamed narrator goes to visit, and his friend at the house is like acting all weird, and they tour the house, and there's like creepy voices in the walls and all this stuff. Turns out he buried his sister, I think, in there. This guy, Roderick Usher, buries his sister in the wall. Not dead yet, though. And
Casting Amontillado.
Yeah. So she like kind of comes out And then the narrator escapes.
She's pissed.
Yeah. And then, what happens? Then Roderick, I think he gets pulled back in. And then the narrator stands outside as the house kind of like folds in on itself in a very upsetting way.
Okay.
It's a great like last paragraph if you read any of it.
God, that sounds amazing, actually.
Because it's just a bit like, cause it's supernatural horror. It's like, you know, Poe, like all these writers of this time, it's almost like they don't have the words yet for the weird shit they want to talk about. That's why it's kind of like romantic gothic is the term, because you have like the romance prose structure, but then you have weird shit you want to talk about. So you use those words and you drop it into this template and you get like Edgar Allan Poe stuff. And even Lovecraft is a little like that too. But this idea of like houses that are messed up for some reason and can like fold in and collapse on each other, that
almost alive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're like embodied with whatever. I mean, this is kind of like the conversation we were having with the Hunchback. In the way, like that, a building that is more than a building.
Basically a person.
Yeah. So, all right. Edgar Allan Poe, obviously big influence there. And he's kind of like that New England-y, like 1800s-y guy. And then we come out of that, we get like obviously Lovecraft stuff in the 20s, like supernatural horrors. There's a little bit of that in Haunted Mansion. I feel like there's some weird, like endless dark void stuff going on every once in a while. Then, all right, who else did I write down? MC Escher. We like him, right?
We love MC Escher.
The weird stairs are kind of...
the House of Escher, am I right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. He did die.
Yes, I'm a huge MC Escher fan, actually.
I feel like just the graphical inclinations of the design of this just feel like they must have
upside down stairs are the biggest giveaway. And like one of the coolest things, I remember the first time I wrote on it, it did break down just briefly at this, like close to the start. And so you're seeing all these upside down staircases and stuff, and they have footprints that are walking on them. And I was just like, that rules. It's such a small thing.
Right.
But I was just like, yeah, like that's really cool.
Yeah, it's this like extra Disney touch, right? That makes it like...
Yeah, and for you, so you notice it.
Yeah.
Like you're just like, like it's just nice.
Yeah, it makes it feel like it's being used. I don't know how to describe it, but all the parts of the mansion feel like they are alive and active. They're not just like a thing that you're looking at, like a sculpture. Like they're all
like
in
stuff
motion,
was happening
right?
before you were there.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like happening after you were gone.
Yes. Okay, so some movies that probably influence this stuff, because this is the stuff that's floating around in the culture of the time. We've got the perfectly named The Dark Old House, 1937, Boris Karloff feature. Have you seen that?
No.
It's cool. If you just look at the trailer for it, you get it. It's like dark and stormy night. A group of people arrive at a house, you know, like the person
Boris
answers
Karloff
the doors.
Like,
yeah, he's there just playing himself. It's kind of like this Andy Kaufman type of performance. And he, you know, it's like, you don't want to stay here. You sure? You have nowhere else to go? Okay, you're all going to get a separate room. There's going to be like shutters clanging and all that. Long shadows, madness, all the stuff is there. You've got a host kind of like showing you around the space, but not telling you everything you need to know.
Classic.
Yeah. Then we get, okay, here's where it starts to shift, right? Because you have the haunted mansion, the idea of this house, the dark old house, but then you get the idea of the vengeful bride, right? Mm-hmm. Which is kind of like that trope that you see in a lot of Hitchcock movies of like the angry woman. Like Hitchcock has like the angry woman character in like Rebecca is a big one. Have you ever seen Rebecca?
Mm-mm. I haven't seen any Hitchcock movies.
Oh, okay.
I want to, though. I'm sorry to anyone who cares and is listening.
Well, I only bring it up because that's kind of like the psychological horror of the 60s is kind of within the Haunted Mansion. For as much as it's like an old haunted house thing, it's also pulling a little Hitchcock type of stuff in with the story of and like parodying it, because it's like those movies have already come out. But
well, I want to jump in with one that this is an incredibly half-assed comment, because I literally have only seen half of it so far. Because I just got pulled away from it and I was watching it the other night. I was watching the 1959 House on Haunted Hill the other day, because I was like, 'tis the season. I love old movies like that. Vincent Price, like, throw it on. This is great. And that just feels Disney as all hell to me. Yeah. Like, I mean, Vincent Price was literally in like Grey Mouse Detective later. So like that, he's kind of a Disney voice just by means of that. But he's playing the like smart host. All the ghost frights in that are pretty well, so far that I've seen, and they're like, it's not actually like stuff hasn't popped off yet. Because hopefully I'll get to see the last half of the movie and then really watch out. But I felt like it was a ride. And then there's like a tension between Vincent Price and his wife. Mm-hmm. They're hosting these people in this haunted house, and if you can stay overnight, I'll pay you $10,000 or whatever. Yeah. But also like he and his wife hate each other, and they're like constantly sort of snidely referencing trying to kill each other. So it has all of that, because it also feels like family appropriate somehow, despite that.
Right.
And maybe it's just because in that era, movies were just a little bit hokier.
Yeah.
But like that just felt so flavorful. Even like Vince, I had to be like, Vincent Price didn't do the voice on Haunted Mansion, did he? And like, no, he didn't. But they have like the same tenor.
Right.
Like, quality of speaking.
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah. Like it's a type of guy.
Yeah, like Paul Frees is like if Orson Welles and Vincent Price like merged into one unit.
So like, so that whole Shirley Jackson story, and then we get the other adaptation of it in the 60s. It's just called The Haunting. Have you ever seen that one?
No.
That one, I feel like I can't remember the one you're talking about. I can't remember seeing it, though I know I did when I was a kid. But The Haunting, I've seen a lot more recently. And some of the haunts from that actually show up in the Haunted Mansion. There's like these great scenes. There's like the bulging door is in The Haunting.
Yeah, that's cool.
And also there's this great shot of just close up of wallpaper that you're like, it kind of looks like a face, which is like the wallpaper. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, oh yeah, you guys just like love movies and you made this ride.
Disney's a thief.
Yeah. I mean, it is true. Like, I feel like that feels so good to know that, and little things like, the facade of the Disneyland Haunted Mansion, I can dig up the photo that they literally just adapted the building from. Mm-hmm. Like they just full out just took it. Yeah. And that's fine. It's not like copywriting, because what it becomes is different, but it's just.
And why wouldn't they, honestly, if it's like a deliberate architectural flavor, like you're not going to get that. New Orleans looks like New Orleans.
Right.
It doesn't look like anywhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. So. Yeah. It's just like, it's kind of I don't know how to describe it, but it's like the right way to steal or something, right?
Great job, Disney.
Yeah, grab it, take it.
But be careful. Tread careful.
Okay, so we're going to move away from the Hill House, this idea of like these guests visiting this building. And then and bringing in, that other idea of the kind of serial killer, like psychotic murderer trends of the time. Because like the book Psycho was like Robert Bloch's late 50s book is such a cultural touchstone for people. It's like, holy shit, I'm just like learning about this guy, Ed Gein, and like how fucked up he was. And like, this is all, most podcasts are about these stories, right? Of like your favorite serial killer, right? So it's all captured in a fun way in the Haunted Mansion, later in the ride. So now, a couple other things. I feel like there's a little, have you ever seen The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari?
Yes, I have seen that, yeah.
There's a bit of that in the wonkiness of like the floors are uneven or things are like stretched in at weird angles,
Lots of stretching.
Yeah, yeah.
So much stretching, yes.
So that's a bit in here. A little bit of Nosferatu, probably. Just in that the way the house kind of, and we'll get into this with the Gothic revival discussion of the building itself, but the kind of bridging of European culture in American landscape is like so much of what these haunted stories are, because the building doesn't feel like it belongs in America in like a way. You know what I mean? And that's kind of like the classic vampire story.
These vampires don't belong in America either.
Exactly. Oh, you know what? I was looking up Nosferatu because I'm like, I don't really know about the making of that story. Apparently the filmmaker, I don't remember his name, but he was really invested in like bringing occultism to the motion picture industry. And I just kind of admire that. That's all I have on it. But I don't know. Like, I don't know if it was like, I have stories to tell that can only be told.
Or he was like, people need to know that this is real.
Yeah.
I guess we'll never know because I assume that he's dead.
Yeah, they're all dead.
As far as we know. He could be one of the happy haunts.
That might be like the intermission point. I'm not sure. Thus ends my backstory notes. And now we're going to get into like the ride, I think. Where am I? Oh, yeah. All right, Caitlin, we're still in the parking lot.
Hell yeah. So this is what we've been having this conversation the whole time?
Yeah, I think so.
This is
so
like
far.
live.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
Can you turn on the air conditioning, like roll down a window?
No, we've just
hot.
everything's foggy. We're sweating.
I'm so
We're
tired.
dehydrated. We opened the car door into a hot August blazing summer day in
I
Florida.
pass out from heat exhaustion and die.
Okay, well, this is our imagination. So what time of year, what's prime going to Disney World time?
Oh, off season. I'm going to say like February.
Oh, okay.
Like weird times.
Ooh, yeah. So it's like 70-ish.
It's November, like a good time. Yeah, like the weird months where like kids aren't there.
Yeah, November
and no one
sounds
else
good.
Is there. Yeah.
Because maybe there's some Christmas decorations up yet. I like.
Oh, I would love, but without the Christmas crowds.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to see it Christmas Day.
The dream. That's what heaven is.
Okay. Yeah.
An empty. Oh, can I tell you? This is like, it's embarrassing because in a way.
You can tell me anything embarrassing.
I feel like I'm old enough. Like I lived, the 90s were a time of being shamed about things that you liked that were not like authentic. And like liking Disney was not cool if you were trying to be cool.
Yeah.
But one of the best moments of my life happened a few years ago. I hadn't been to Disney World in forever, even though I had like grown up with it. Cause I was like, whatever, I'm not doing that anymore. Like there's other things.
I'm
done
cool
it.
now.
Yeah. But my friend, her brother was a bartender at Disney World. She's like, let's all go to Florida. And my brother's going to kind of like get us in and we're going to get like magic hours, which is like that after hour thing.
Yeah.
I probably told you this story, but you can like live in it again.
I don't think you have.
No?
So
okay.
Embarrass
It's not
yourself.
that long of a story.
Yeah.
So we get the magic hours. It's December. So it's like right before Christmas.
Freezing
so it's sparkling
cold in Florida.
And my friend's a bartender. So we go to the Grand Floridian, which is the really tall, big kind of like Southern-y feeling.
One of the fancy boy.
Yeah. And there's like a band. There's like a brass band playing in the lobby under the tree. And we're sitting in the upstairs cocktail bars drinking for free because our friend's the bartender.
Sounds amazing.
Hooking us up. So we're getting like a little drunk and now it's like 9 p.m. and the fireworks are going off. So he's like, well, we have the magic passes. And I didn't know what that was at the time. It's like, it means we can go back when everybody's leaving.
You're like, whoa, what?
Exactly. Yeah. My head spun around on its axis. So we finish our drinks and we all like run back to the gates of the Magic Kingdom as all these families and all these bratty kids covered in sticky like candy holding like crappy flashlights or whatever the things that you have to buy because
the neon stuff.
Main Street is just selling you everything.
Enjoy putting your kids to bed, rubes.
Yeah, good luck out there. So these people are all coming out as we are like drunkenly entering. So the place is clearing out and we just, and we just run through a slowly emptying park to the Haunted Mansion as like, you know, the stars are out and it's late night.
Sounds amazing.
It was great. And then we rode the ride and that was the first time I'd been on it since I was a kid. And I'm like,
oh my God.
This is the greatest night of my life. I said that on the ride.
And the ghosts were like, yeah, I know.
Yeah. They just like,
obviously.
nodded. Yeah. It's the greatest night of their life too.
No, they were like, this is Tuesday.
Yeah.
I feel nothing.
Normal. They're like, somebody says this every hour on the hour.
You're not new. You're not special, kid.
But that was great. And I guess I can feel no shame about it now that I've told you and whoever else is listening to this.
I loved that story.
All right. So you and I were leaving the parking lot. I've just told you that story. We're entering. We enter Disney World.
Hi, Disney World.
Hi, we wave. We've got. Let's go to the Haunted Mansion because the story.
Wait, am I gonna have to remember the directions?
No, I've got them all.
Okay,
I'll clue you in.
Perfect. Okay.
All right,
because I'm blind. I have a blindfold on.
So we pass there's a big Mickey amidst a Mickey face amidst a big bed of flowers out front in a very Epcot type of way, right? Mm-hmm. And now you get like a clock face as you go underneath the tracks for the rail
for the train, around,
right? And then you enter onto Main Street. Now in Disneyland, Main Street is like the Walt Disney Midwest Main Street. But in Florida, it's actually like very much Saratoga Springs.
Yes, it is.
Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like the awnings like are the same. And
we actually stayed one of the last times we went with a big group. It was like my husband and like his mom and like my mom brought her like godson and all this stuff. And we stayed in the tree houses that were, because
Cool.
they like fit a larger group, but they're attached basically to the Saratoga Springs themed hotel.
Oh, what's it called?
I think it's just called Saratoga Springs.
Oh, is it? All
and
right,
they've got like
together.
horses everywhere, and that's kind of the theme. And like
Yeah.
architecturally, it's very Saratoga. But straight up, they have a themed Saratoga Springs hotel, so you can enjoy that if you ever go and you're from the Saratoga Springs area.
Oh, okay. So we bring that up specifically because it is true, but also because this haunted mansion is very Hudson Valley-ish, and Saratoga Springs, if you're unaware, which you probably are, even if you know like the Carly Simon song, is like a racehorse town in upstate New York that's like very wealthy and also very well designed and has maintained a lot of its aesthetic over the years, right? There's a lot of like new buildings within it, but it still like feels like a grand old downtown.
It's a very like the Eagleton to like our area's Pawnee. I say that's a
Sure.
Parks and Rec reference.
Exactly.
For the kids out there that don't know what that is. But yeah, it's the bougie part of the town.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
a separate town, but
So this is our fairy tale Main Street, right? Like kind of a Saratoga Springs, maybe a little Atlantic City-ishness to it. And we pass that and we arrive at the hub, right? Which is that center point where all the themed lands break out from. And you've got like a bronze Walt waving
Walt
at
Disney,
you.
he's holding Mickey's hand, I think, if I'm not on one.
Yeah, maybe they're crossing a street.
I'm not, but he is there though.
Are they holding hands as lovers, peers, parent and child?
Do you think it's lovers?
I just felt like
like to
once
hear
I
why.
decided to say one of the options, I felt like I needed to run
You
down
really
all
have
the
to go.
options.
I honestly, it probably is a parent-child vibe.
Yeah, I guess so, right?
Makes sense.
So like Mickey's his adopted son
Yeah.
that he's exploited.
Well,
to the
I mean,
nth
he
degree.
birthed him, really, when you think about it.
Yeah,
I don't like where this is going.
you said birthed. I didn't say birthed.
You said lovers first.
That's true.
Lovers, burst.
All
It
right.
all kind of exists in the same universe.
All right, we're in the hub. We're 10 o'clock on the hub. We're exiting. We are crossing a bit of the moat from the Cinderella Hotel. There's a little bridge. Can you
True.
picture it?
I can, actually.
Okay.
Extremely accurately.
We're walking, holding hands.
If you want to.
Okay.
As parent and child?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm the parent. I call it.
All right. So we cross this little bridge at about 10 o'clock. On our right is Cinderella's castle. Seen it, done it. Who cares?
So much bigger than the one at Disneyland, though, just for the record. If you go to Disneyland expecting it to be big like the Disney World one, it isn't.
I think the Disney World one it's my favorite one, I guess, but maybe because I'm most familiar with it.
Yeah, and that one was like, oh, the Majesty, it's so big. And you go
Yeah.
to Disneyland, it's like, it's very tiny in comparison.
And then like they cheaped out with the Paris one. It's like not that great.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know. Tokyo might have a great one. I can't remember.
I am desperate to go to the Tokyo one.
Yeah.
More
That's
on
a
this
field
as
trip.
it develops. Oh, like, let's go to Tokyo.
Yeah.
If you're a wealthy benefactor, we're available.
We're talking to you. You can just have
Look
this
me in the
episode
eyes right
exclusively.
now.
All right. So we're still crossing the bridge. We enter into Liberty Square, kind of the marketplace. You can get like, it's kind of seaside. Here's where it gets interesting. Not that it wasn't interesting before, but this is where it
It's
gets
finally gotten interesting.
So we're kind of in New England, basically, like in a way, but in front of us is like the Mark Twain riverboat. So that's kind of like the southern states off to the left. But if you veer to the right, you arrive in kind of a New England-y type of
This is the president
space.
area.
Yes. It's kind of the boring area.
This is colonial Williamsburg.
Right. Yep, exactly. A lot of like white painted boarded.
It was like white
buildings.
people.
And just a lot of whiteness in general.
Yeah,
right?
it's a very white area.
And we have like these little pieces of architecture that represent different aspects of, we kind of have like the revival columns are kind of slightly kind of North Carolina. What do you call it? Plantation? What's the word? Antebellum?
Antebellum, yeah.
Yeah, like that type of facade. Then we also have little references to Midwestish stuff. Like there's the Diamond Horseshoe that is kind of like supposed to be the St. Louis Gateway like the gateway to the
wow,
west thing.
I'd never noticed that.
Yeah, so all these little things do.
Is that kind of Frontierland adjacent? Because that would make sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of logic to all this, whether you recognize it or not. So instead of turning towards Frontierland or Adventureland,
guys,
we move further into Liberty Land here, the land of liberty.
Tom Sawyer's Island is also there.
Right. On our left is Tom Sawyer's Island and the river that comes through it. And if you look up to the hill, this is where we see like kind of the Hudson Valley, and the Haunted Mansion is like in the distance on its own.
Yeah.
Right? It's kind of like this weird back corner in a way, which is pretty cool.
It's awesome.
Yeah. Because it kind of just makes itself apparent in the distance. And it's like you get in this.
Can't miss it.
Yeah. It's the ride that feels like farthest away to get to.
It has the Las Vegas effect where everything looks like it's actually it's like, it's close, right? But it's like really not. This is sort of like the opposite of that.
Exactly. Yeah. So lucky for us, the wait time sign says 0 minutes because this is our imagination.
It's magic hours.
Right. Oh, is it nighttime?
But it's really hot for some reason, canonically.
Now, before we get in the ride line, we're going to be in it for a little bit. Do you want anything to eat? Like, I guess you could technically eat in line.
Yeah, literally though, the only place, I don't know if there's like a street vendor here, although I could definitely fuck with one of those. Can I say that? I could definitely fuck with one of those, the chocolate covered like vanilla ice cream Mickey. Like,
oh yeah.
Shit. Oh my God.
Oh, that's a good one.
One of the most delightful things. They have that Columbia restaurant that's like really close to here.
Oh yeah.
I've eaten there a bunch of times and like, it's not that great. It's just okay.
Right.
So
that's part of the New Englandness, right? It's like kind of Boston harbor restaurant type of feeling.
The people in there, I swear, I don't know if this is true or not, but in my memory, all of the like staff are in like Benjamin Franklin outfits.
Oh, totally.
Does that make sense? Like, yeah. So I don't know if that's really true, but that's the vibe.
So we run into it's, the whole storybook landness of Disney stuff. Like there's kind of a weird collision of all these things because in a way, Haunted Mansion should feel like it's a New England coastal mansion that's on the edge of a cliff, like kind of in like the Atlantic is kind of crashing against it. Oh, yeah. But it's not. It's like it's actually like more upstate New York along the Hudson River. And both of them have a relationship to the ocean because as you approach the Haunted Mansion, there is, and within the story of the Haunted Mansion, there is the sea captain-ness of it all, which makes it feel Boston-y. But as people that live in the Hudson Valley, we know that a lot of ship captain culture has come up the Hudson. Like the town of Hudson is so like true. An old whaling town, right? Mm-hmm. So it all does kind of fit, even though there's like this idea that maybe the house is like actually New England. It's not really. It's upstate New York. And
they're different.
They're different places for those that don't know. I don't know where any of you are from. So
sound off in the comments. Let us know.
All right. So we're passing, Boston, Nantucket, some New Bedford, all these sailing inns. And we approach the entrance of the Haunted Mansion. The building itself, just kind of looking at it. We see, okay, here's where we break down the look, this idea of this haunted house. The Dutch colonial manor house is sort of like the default of like types of old buildings that you would see in this region. A lot of them built on the money of sea captains that have either retired or like built a residence along this river valley. So a lot of these early houses would be lived in by like haunted sea captains or like wealthy men of industry and whatnot.
Or their vengeful wives.
Right.
Or both.
Right. They bring the vengeful wife with them. And we'll get more into that. I have a little more on that story once we meet her.
My wife.
So the Gothic element here, this is kind of an interesting thing that I hadn't really thought totally about, but it's come up in this sort of like reading of the facade. Actually, I have way too many notes. I'm just fumbling through this now.
We're doing great.
Okay.
No refunds.
I'm not going to read all this. That's crazy. I'm not going to read all that.
Listeners, he has a whole book in his
I have this
entire book.
Fairly sizable passage that I do want to read, but we're just not going to do it.
No, do it.
No, I'm going to kind of summarize a little bit.
It would be a great excuse for me to put on some chapstick. Hold on, I'm doing that.
Okay. All right. I'll dig into this a little more. There's this book the Imagineers had at this time. There's evidence of this. For some reason, somebody is very well aware of this. A book
Can you believe it, folks? A book.
By David Mumford called, maybe somebody's screaming this out. No, not David Mumford. Okay. The Decorative Art of Victoria's Era by Francis Lichton is this book that Imagineer David Mumford had. And this is where he gets to the photo that becomes the reference point for the New Orleans inspired original Haunted Mansion in Disneyland. Okay?
The one we know not of.
Yes. Now, within this book is a lot more breakdown of the Victorians' obsession with like Gothic aesthetic. And there's this really cool phrase, this idea of a mansion being castellated. Have you ever heard that term, spelling bee champ?
No, but I love it and I feel like I know what it means.
All right. So here's how this works. Now, we go back to Sir Walter Scott. He was a big famous author. He wrote, what's the book? Ivanhoe. What is that? Like 1820s or 30s. Sir Walter Scott is like this big literary figure. Now, with all his money, he builds himself a mansion in Scotland that is new, but also cobbles together all these elements of crumbling medieval mansions that are there because he can afford to do this, and builds this weird collage of an ancient castle that feels like it's from, like the 12th century, but is actually, in the mid 1800s. And he's so famous, his book, his kind of like historical fiction story of like knights and chivalry and romance. It's such a big trend. All these Victorians are like, I want to be like Sir Walter Scott, but how do I do it? Well, it's the Industrial Revolution. So we can actually afford to get like Gothic elements in our crappy, like Gregorian, plain, whitewashed homes. So thanks to, like the miter saw and like plaster techniques, people that revive the Gothic architecture by their obsession with this sort of like literary movement, by just putting really ornate fireplaces in their homes, or like dense molding around their ceilings and candelabras and all this stuff that is like, 400 or 500 years old, like to feel like your home is a castle. And that's the Gothic revival aesthetic.
God, it's like Rococo, but it's spooky.
Yeah. So I just thought I had never really followed the track back to that, because like when you look at the haunted mansion and you look at these types of buildings that are clearly built, a couple hundred years ago, you're like, why do these things feel so much older? But also they kind of look cheap. So like if you look at the Haunted Mansion, it's brick. It's like Hudson Valley brick building with little elements that feel kind of like stone medievalish jammed
it's like,
in there.
There's a turret.
Yeah, so instead of being like a stone castle, it's like a weird fake brick castle.
Yeah, you have
Which
this like
cool.
little gondola thing. I forget what they're actually called, but those little like roundels that are on top of like old churches.
Yeah,
There's,
yeah.
Like a tiny little one up there.
Yeah.
It's like, throw that on.
Right. It's
no
just
utility. I just want it.
Right. And because it's so cheap to make this stuff, you really do, it's a low bar to just overdo it. It's like you don't have to be like a great artisanal figure like hired by a church to decorate it. You can just be like some like upper middle class person that just buys a bunch of shit and fills your house with it.
And you should be ashamed of yourself.
Yeah, you should. And here's another great little detail I came across. So while as a cool, trendy Victorian, you're filling your house with all this cool Gothic stuff, what you quickly come to realize is a lot of it doesn't sustain itself in direct sunlight. The plaster becomes really brittle and breaks down. Thus, you cover your windows in heavy drapery curtains, so you just like live in perpetual gloom.
Wow.
So that's like the darkness comes from a practicality of trying to preserve all this weird shit, and suddenly you're just living in this like a tomb. Yeah.
Whoa.
And here we are, right?
That was crazy.
And this is stuff we've all been talking about in the line. So luckily we're the only two people in the line, because I don't know if everybody wants to hear just like this sort of rambling.
People would be
on.
Like, move!
Yeah.
Like we are trying to get on.
All right. Now, what Kayla and I are going to do at this point, for those of you that are still with us, and you're paying for this, so you might as well stick around.
No refunds.
We're going to, if you feel us getting a little distracted time to time, it's because we're actually like playing through the ride through the Haunted Mansion Dark Ride 2020 Magic Kingdom Disney Park on the channel Attractions 360.
1 million views.
Yeah.
You know it's good.
So this is like the really high res, like fisheye lens tour of the Haunted Mansion. All right. Once we pass through the awning, we have the little carriage, like the
horseless carriage, essentially. Like there's a horse shaped outfit. I don't know what those are called. Like the rig
little, like,
that attaches the horse. Yeah.
His little horsey bondage.
Yeah. The weird, sexy horse outfit that attaches into the carriage. But no horse inside.
Yeah. Scary.
Like a ghost horse.
Okay. On a scary meter, 0 to 10, where?
0.
Okay.
Probably for other people, maybe that'd be scary, but I'm like, yeah, that's awesome.
Now, isn't there it's towing a coffin carriage, right?
Oh, yeah, like a hearse carriage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
0.
So 1,
scary.
I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, because death.
Yeah, it might not even, it might be empty.
Yeah. I don't know the story with that prop, so maybe you're not getting your money's
It's literally
worth.
always been there in my experience, so yeah, I don't
It
know.
looks aged. In fact, I've looked at it sometimes and I'm surprised at how little cleaning gets done to it. I'm like, this is dirtier than a lot of Disney stuff sometimes.
Maybe that's
like,
part of it.
Oh, okay, that it's just untended.
Yeah, like maybe it's dirty. Maybe that's like painted on or whatever.
Oh, that's
and
true.
You're like, this looks so real. Oh my god.
Yeah, like the gum somebody stuck to the window is part
like,
of Mark Davis's vision.
It's Mark Davis's gum.
Oh, well, that's pretty cool.
It's this little signature.
All right, so we go through this long line that leads basically up a driveway, I suppose you might say, towards the bottom of the Haunted Mansion. Weirdly enough, you do not go in the front door of this building at all.
I don't think we can afford to.
Oh, that's true.
We're
Oh,
one of
are
the
we
servants.
the help? Is that like the role
Or we're
we
like
play?
ghost food.
Oh, the ghost food. Yeah, we come up the coal chamber. Now we do get a fun little experience before we get into the Haunted Mansion. It's kind of like this little maze of little puzzles and interactive games that sort of set the tone, I guess, for what you're about to get into in a way.
And make you feel less bad about standing in a line for a long time.
Right. So what are some of the things there? There's the 3 busts that do the weird puzzle where you're like, I'm like this person, but if they're the killer,
oh,
then
yeah.
I'm the thing. It's one of those little games.
The one
that
I honestly don't remember most of the interactive stuff except for that there's one that you can touch and it's like more like a mausoleum type
Actually,
thing.
let's get that book open.
Okay.
You'll see it. You can open it. It's about halfway.
Okay.
It's a terrifying
I've
book.
died.
It's the Necronomicon.
What? Okay. Where?
Yeah, about halfway through the book, it starts going through the parts of the ride. So you should see
Is it
like
the grounds?
Yeah.
I love the grounds. I'm turning to page 62 to see if I can find what I'm talking about. So far, no. Okay, hold on. Please hold.
Oh, you're going too far.
I don't see it in here.
Oh, maybe it's not iconic enough.
Wow, what a rip. Oh, no, I'm wrong. I just didn't see a photo that I recognized. It's the composer.
The composer.
Yes. So you'll approach something, and it is kind of like a big mausoleum, but on one side of it, there's an organ.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
a fake organ, but
Yeah.
like built into it with some like garlands of skulls on it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's musical instruments carved on the side, and you can touch them, and they'll play the Haunted Mansion song with the
Mhm.
Grim Grinning Ghost song in whatever instrument you touched.
Yeah.
So, and that one is pretty fun because you can like make the whole song if you just sort of like boop, 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 like touch a bunch of them.
Oh, yeah.
It'll play the song, with like all the instruments.
That's fun. And it very much fits what you're going to get in the ride, because if you really listen to the music of the ride, it is the theme over and over, but like just shifted instrument wise to fit like the mood of the space.
Yeah,
is
until it
very
gets
cool.
full turn at the end.
Yeah. I feel like enough credit isn't given to just the soundscaping of the whole Haunted Mansion. Like, where's that t-shirt?
That's a great. How would you do that?
I don't know. We can have the wallpaper t-shirt, but can we have like, the kind of diegetic sound t-shirt of the Haunted Mansion?
Yeah, it is good. I'm pretty sure the speakers or whatever, like for the narration, come from like the Doom Buggy too.
Yeah.
So it's just like it's such a simple thing, but then it's like you hear the thing, and it's only for you.
Right.
So it's not running over itself, and it's nice.
Yeah, the innovation of the audio experience, because like, I don't know if you've ever come across this, but there's like the story of the speaker setup Walt Disney wanted for Fantasia. He's like, this auditorium cannot give you the experience
The
of the
godlike
orchestra.
experience. That
It's
I
like
have to have.
Fantasia sound or something like that was the term. I can't remember. But it's kind of like that pursuit, right? Like giving you as much that as visual.
Yeah.
Which is
Walt
cool.
Disney would have loved the metaverse.
Oh yeah.
Just fully immerse yourself in this
would.
new world.
Oh yeah, he would have been all in. Okay, what else is on the grounds that's fun? I remember there's like the sea captain where he's like in a coffin, but his leg's like poking out.
Yeah, his like hand is like sticking over the edge.
Yeah, there's barnacles.
Captain Culpepper Klein. It's a crypt.
Yeah.
Crypt of Captain Culpepper Klein. And I guess this is more of a reference to Ken Anderson's original sea captain sort of vibe.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember encountering this personally, although I'm sure it was there. But I guess like water sprays out of it. Which I think there's these like barnacle sort of formulations on the bottom half of it, and they'll all like squirt water, which I think is very funny.
Yeah, and also I think if you look at the top, bubbles kind of like float up from it.
Yeah.
It's got a little bit, I like it. It's leaning almost a bit too much into the Pirates of the Caribbean movie look of the way it's like barnacle covered, like weird zombieified. Yeah,
it's almost a little,
stuff.
It's like very subtle in comparison to that, but maybe it's just the oceanic theme too. It's like a little bit discordant with what you would think of as the Haunted Mansion.
Right, which kind of evokes the idea that this is supposed to be like a seaside town, because in early Mark Davis art, we talked about this beforehand a little bit, but young Mark Davis, born 1920s-ish, a little earlier probably. This is when Herman Melville's Moby Dick hits big. Like the book had come out long before, but people hadn't really picked up on it. Herman Melville lived not far from where we're recording this for a while. He didn't write Moby Dick here, but it's we're in a whaling industry area. It's a book about whaling. Young Mark Davis made some really cool Moby Dick art that Caitlin and I were looking at earlier.
Admiring, dare I say.
Yeah. And that's a book about supernatural horror. Right. It's just like very toned down from what we would come to get later. But like Moby Dick is like a supernatural being in like a giant void of like oceanness horror that if you come upon it as like a human with bad intentions, like it will destroy you. Right. That's kind of like
I never
horror
read
trope.
Moby Dick, but yeah, that sounds terrifying.
Yeah. I mean, that stuff, right? Like the Ahab, like the, what happens to him. So Mark Davis.
R.I.P. to a real one.
He really seemed to early on want to kind of bring in some kind of nautical, like Dead Sea Captain stuff. So I guess him and Ken were like, oh, we're going to have this, but it doesn't really play out once you're inside the mansion. Yeah,
I think it feels like they abandoned that. There is like a deceased bride thing going. It's very fleeting though, I feel, and I don't think you really get
She's never married to like a sea captain.
Yeah, they don't delve enough into a narrative for that, and I think maybe that was suited more to a walkthrough thing where you're just sort of in an area where you are experiencing the vibe of it,
right? Instead
of like being taken through a timed narrative.
Yeah. So, okay, so we kind of move through. We've got this kind of Flying Dutchman, gothy ghost character, very kind of like Rime of the Ancient Mariner feeling. We pass all this stuff, and what else do we have on the ground? Anything worth note?
This is such a small thing, and it's not interactive, but I will just say that I really like all of the silly little gravestones, and they have like sonnets about how the person died.
Oh, right,
or like limericks, I think. And they're just funny. That's it.
Now, I didn't dig into those because there were other things that interested me more, but I believe a lot of those between the parks are all references to like Imagineers that have worked on the ride.
I didn't know that. Yeah. And I love that.
Yeah. I think there's like a Marcus David, it'll like play with the name or like do something weird. There's like, well, there's great. So we have our figure, our story guy, or not our story guy, but our special effects guy, Yale Gracie. Gracie, is this called Gracie Manor? Is the mansion called Gracie Manor? Did you come across that? Mm-mm. Okay, I might have misread that.
I love the idea of that, though.
All right, fine. Well, that's going to be on our bootleg tour.
It's Gracie.
Fact. All right. So a little thing I took note of, but I've never really seen, and you could probably only really see it after dark, is if you look up to the windows, you can see like a lighting effect of like a figure moving through them.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Have you ever noticed that?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. At night, they light up the whole spot, I feel like. Because I feel like I don't know if that's supposed to be like a greenhouse type attachment.
Yeah, like the conservatory or whatever you call those buildings.
Yeah, that's kind of like semicircle, like half round on the outside of the building. But
yeah.
I'm pretty sure that gets lit up kind of like eerily in the night as well.
Yeah, and one of the original Ken Anderson ideas was the story began with like a hand reaching, like you're seeing through a window and a hairy arm like grabs a figure and pulls them up. Hairy arms were like a big thing back then.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
I think we can all agree. I see a hairy arm, I'm out of there.
Intense masculinity is just kind of like a frightening
whoa.
concept.
What is that, some kind of sea captain?
So now we enter, I suppose, what's called the foyer.
Or even the foyer, if you're feeling French.
Yeah. So we enter in kind of like the celery door type of space. And the first thing we see is what? I suppose it's just the portrait chamber, right? There's nothing really before that.
Not really. There's sort of a... If I'm remembering correctly, which I may not be, there's sort of just like a little bit of an antechamber before that, where everybody sort of goes in.
Yeah.
And then the portrait room opens up and you would all sort of be moved in there.
Right.
But there's nothing sort of unique about that.
Okay.
place.
So we get to, I mean, this ride starts off so good. Is there anything actually cooler than like the stretching room?
No, I love that part.
It's like the
that's
best.
the part of the Haunted Mansion, I think, to me.
Right.
And I think it's just genuine. Like, Paul Frees's voice here in the Haunted Mansion is iconic to me as the Thriller voiceover in like the Michael Jackson song. Like, it's
totally.
Like, it's the same energy, it's the same vibe, and it's great. It's really great.
Do you want to read some of his lines there? Because so what Caitlin and I have here before us is the transcript of the ghost host dialogue. And so it's broken down room by room. So we can like share with you in case you've never really taken in some of the great phrasing that exists here. We can pull a couple phrases. So imagine you're entering this decagonical, I don't know how many sides it has, room with like this long vertical wallpaper and these like great gargoyle sconces.
I love these gargoyles too, like holding candles, like 2 candles over their head.
And what do we get to? What's told to us?
I have to start at the beginning.
If you want to, just find something that you think sounds fun.
And I like how it starts roughly after I'm skipping a little bit. Welcome, foolish mortals, to the Haunted Mansion. I am your host. Your ghost host. Honka honka. That's not part of it. That was editorial.
That's fine.
Our tour begins here in this gallery. Pictured in this room is a gallery of paintings, not photos. Here, where you see paintings of some of our guests as they appeared in their corruptible mortal state. Getting into like some kind of advanced territory for Disney.
Yeah.
Like, what are you saying? Like,
yeah.
What does that mean, corruptible mortal state?
Like people, I guess, were more literary back then, right? Like you could throw a phrase like this out at people at a theme park.
Yeah, and it's just like...
Or is it supposed to sound decorative and like annoyingly complicated?
Probably. It's just... All of this is kind of a departure from what you would expect from Disney stuff. Because like I've never thought of the Haunted Mansion as being actually scary, but they just talk about people dying in a way that they don't in other stuff a lot of the time.
Yeah. There's something specifically menacing about this room too, right? Because you get like okay, so it's like drag your bodies away from the walls and into the dead center of the room. Your cadaverous pallor betrays an aura of foreboding. Goddamn, so good. I mean,
that one is really good. Your cadaverous pallor betrays an aura of foreboding, almost as though you sense a disquieting metamorphosis. And that's just like, oh, the room is moving.
Yeah.
But it's like, what a wonderful poetic way.
This is that Poe romanticism.
Yeah.
Right?
Your cadaverous pallor. It's like, yeah, okay, I'm freaking.
Yeah. Is it your imagination? And consider this dismaying observation. This chamber has no windows and no doors. I think that is like my favorite phrase of all time. Just so there's this idea of like icebox horror. Have you ever heard that phrase? Mm-mm. It's like the type of horror that exists. You wake up in the middle of the night. You can't sleep. You're hungry. You go down to the fridge. You open the door. You're caught in this like aura of light, but everything around you is like black, right? Like nothing exists outside of this, but what you're seeing isn't what it is in the daylight. It's this feeling of like just cold terror that resonates after the fact. Like nothing's really going on, but there's something that is not feeling right about all of this, right? That's like the idea of icebox horror. And this room is like exactly that. In the sudden reveal that has been here all along, that there are no doors and no windows.
Well, I love it. It's like you came in through a way, but they do it like you're in a crowd. Yeah. They usher you into the center of the room. And then, you're looking up at the stretching walls. And he's like, hey, by the way, you're trapped in here. And like, that is that's spooky. It's spooky.
So to ruin it, here's how this whole thing works. In Disneyland, it's actually an elevator because like the design of the building is that you have to be lowered. So it's interesting to think, and I don't know if there's an answer to this, whether the idea of the stretching room came first or the idea that we needed an elevator comes first. Who knows?
Probably the elevator thing, honestly.
Yeah. So we've got in Disneyland, we've got the elevator that makes the room stretch. But in Disney World, which actually I think it's better done because you can't feel the floor moving, is that like the ceiling is stretching and the wall is like kind of unrolling. It's like on a roll and
I have always wondered this and never wanted to look it up. So that is good to know. There's
a whole paragraph in a book I was reading about how it works, which was very boring, but also very interesting because the way they light it also helps preserve the illusion because the lights are going straight up. So it creates really harsh shadows in places where there are gaps where like the wall is pulling away because the wall keeps going, but the portraits stop at a point, which makes it feel even weirder. It's just such a unique to describe type of thing to make and do. So
it's a cool idea.
Good. All right.
Cleverly realized.
With great dialogue playing out the whole time. All right. Let's look at these portraits. And actually in that book, there's a spread of them, I believe.
You are correct. I saw you. Here it is.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So
describe them.
I feel like it's better when you describe things. You're better at that part of it than I am.
Fine, I'll do it, but you don't get to see it then because I have to look.
I'm just going to listen carefully.
So
this is the Walt Disney World version. Each park has different characters, but
do they?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Okay. Yeah. So in the first portrait, we see. I'll describe them as you first see them. When you walk in the room, they're actually quite short, little, almost like square portraits because of they're so truncated. And you see what looks it's like a woman with a parasol, kind of like carelessly on her shoulder. A rotund gentleman in some kind of like, I don't know, sports jacket. I don't know what he's got going on. I don't know how the fashion worked back then. And there's an older woman holding a flower, and she has something of a shawl over her shoulders and like a cameo on her neck. And then I get a guy that kind of looks sleazy to me, sort of in like a bowler hat type deal, you know, like a street gentleman.
Okay, so just a kind of normal grouping of people.
Yep, Victorian era folk. Yeah. And as we stretch the halls, you find that the young woman with the parasol is standing on a fraying tightrope, and she's in sort of like, she has ballerina shoes on. She's not really a ballerina as such, but she's standing on this fraying tightrope. It's like stretched to the breaking point, and there's an alligator with just like massive wide open jaws like right underneath her, just ready to end this situation.
Very Peter Pan.
100%.
Right?
Yeah. What's the style of this like these portraits are all, they're not like realistic, but they're not like super cartoonish either. It's sort of a halfway point. They're a little bit muddier too. The gentlemanly looking guy with the big beard. First of all, hilariously, he has no pants on, so he's just got like striped boxers, I guess, on, and like just his like hairy legs are out for all to see, but he's also standing on a barrel of dynamite. And the fuse is like super long and just like directly like it's just been lit by a candle that's just sitting there on the ground. Like, where did that even come from?
Is he like a man of industry? Like, is he building a railroad? Like,
yeah, he's sort of like, he has like a sash, and like what looks like a decorated, not like decorated like he was in a war, but just like elaborate pattern, like vest underneath. Like, he looks like he's more of like a gentleman class.
And he spent all his money on the top half.
I guess, yeah, because he's literally about to get all of his junk blown everywhere, and like he's not even wearing pants.
Can't afford them.
It's an interesting, like, what was the decision to have no? I think it was just maybe like they wanted to be like a surprise for you as it's unrolling, to be like, huh, okay. And then the woman, I guess she kind of gets off a little bit scot-free, this older woman, because she's sitting on a very tall gravestone, like grave monument. And it says, "Rest in peace, dear beloved George." And it has a bust of a man at the bottom, like at the base. And he has an axe in his head. So are you supposed to be like, oh, okay, she killed him, I guess? I don't know. Like, but she does not appear to be in any mortal danger, which is great for her.
Right.
So I think she's the one survivor. Because the third guy, the more rough and tumble, like streets-wise gentleman, he's stacked on top of two other men, and they are sinking into a pit of quicksand.
Yeah.
So he looks pretty smug about it, but I think maybe he just doesn't know yet. Like, he's pretty high up on this totem pole of like human men.
Yeah.
So, but probably going to die also. So body count 3. Survivor 1.
It's such a strange, like, to go from the kind of like psychological terror of the no windows, no doors to like the bit of like, he doesn't have pants on.
He has no pants.
It's just like that. It's that clash of ideas that makes the Haunted Mansion like the Haunted Mansion, I guess. Right?
I think that's true. Yeah. Because it's like, that's not something where you're like, oh, I'm actually afraid. It's more like, it's like seeing a pun.
Yeah.
So it's like that kind of humor mixed in.
That's the Mark Davis-ness, I guess, right? Yeah. It's like a visualize it, like the gag. It's heavy gag.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's like, it doesn't really want to scare you, but it's still like, these people are gonna die. The perfect balance. And now, so, these portraits are revealed, and that actually gets dark for a minute because we get thunderclaps, the lights go out, there's a scream, and we look up, and we see someone has hung themselves. Which honestly, I never noticed for the longest time. Yeah, there's a body hanging from like an attic peak. And I've seen, it's like you do have to look directly up. And I think it's one of those things that's sort of like projected on the ceiling. But it was so easy for me to miss it for the longest time. It's also, so it's the first hint of this. The interesting thing about the Haunted Mansion is like when you start to talk about it and look at it, there's like a lot of detective work you could see of like threads of stories that were like abandoned. So this is kind of one of them. This idea that in the original Ken Anderson script that, that the wife, she drives the husband to his death, I believe. So the body might be like a husband who's been perhaps a sea captain, psychologically like damaged. But then we get some of the flip of that sometimes because like you said, there's like the woman who like the only standing figure is like the dangerous woman. Right. So back to that kind of Hitchcock idea. And I think this is something that is like a trope of storytelling that was very prominent in like the 30s and 40s that by the time we get to the 60s, it's like basically a gag. The dangerous woman figure comes from, there's a couple places. And it pops up in the aesthetic of the Haunted Mansion a couple times. This is why I bring it up. So have you ever seen or read or heard of the play Gaslight, which is where that phrase comes from? Mm-hmm. Okay. Patrick Hamilton, author, wrote this really fun book called Hangover Square, which is how I found him. Writes like psychological kind of thrillers. So Gaslight is this famous play that was adapted into a movie about a husband who's a jewel thief that tricks his woman into becoming, his wife into becoming like the distraction so he can be the jewel thief by driving her like mad. So this is like the gaslighting idea. And within that story, so there's that story. Then there's also in the same era, in the same genre is the French movie, I'm going to say it wrong, of course, but like Les Diaboliques, I guess. Have you ever heard of that? No. So this is from the 50s, another psychological thriller about two unsuspecting women who like plot the murder of like a cheating husband, one of their cheating husbands. So over time, these stories, these stories become hits and they mean what they mean in the time. But the trope of like,
the woman who just kills her husband becomes stripped out of that and removed of context. So it just becomes like this meaningless idea of like the hatchet wielding, like angry wife that we see like in the attic later.
Yeah.
I feel like that's because when you see that, like you're saying, there's a tiny version of her at the end and like she's in the attic and then there's this hanging figure. So like, did she kill him? It's a very convoluted version of like a story like that. And I was kind of trying to put the pieces together of like, why is the story kind of about just this woman who keeps killing her husbands? And I feel like it's just a riff on that trope.
Yeah, well, it just feels like they wanted to include that, and then they took out anything that was like a firm narrative, but the pieces were there, so they were like, that's spooky, we'll just leave it in.
Right.
Because when you have the voiceover is like, oh, so this is a chilling challenge, like find your way out now, because there's no windows or doors. There's always my way. And that's when you see the hanged figure, and it's like, so you should just kill yourself. Like, it's basically...
Right.
Which is like, what?
Yeah.
But that's what's it's implying is like, there's one way out. You just gotta kill yourself.
Yeah, like the Haunted Mansion is messing with you.
I'm Disney's Haunted Mansion.
Now when we exit, we go by another portrait that's a lot less funny. It's like the aging man portrait, which...
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember that one? I think it's in that book as well.
It is.
But it's sort of like transitions through from a kind of ugly looking old man to begin with, just a very solemn figure that if you look at it long enough, it shifts through like ages of decay.
Yeah, he turns into like a skeleton. He's still got his eyeballs in there.
Yeah.
It's pretty gnarly.
Which is just sort of like the way the eyes, like the scariest one to me is like the sunken version right before death, where he's just on death's door and his
like
eyes
all
are
the collagen has been gone. And yeah.
That's one of the like creepier things because it's played so straight. But it's like a great illusion. Yeah. So that's one of those effects that I think has been updated over time. I think originally it was like layers of varying types of opacity with like the light changes over time. But now I think it's like a digital thing.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure on some. And then there's like a hall of portraits at one point where it's clearly just like UV painted stuff. Yeah, on top
those
of it.
Those are a little
it's
more
like
traditional.
Super, yeah.
Yeah.
Super simple.
So we got the aging man, which kind of evokes the trope of the juxtaposition of youth and antiquity, and the way like time is kind of irrelevant in this place that you are now trapped in, where there's like the Gothic and the revival of it, but you're also a new person. So this book I was reading, here's a weird idea that this book poses for some reason. I feel like I should shout out this book. Boundless Realm by Fox Nolte, which is a small publisher. I don't know where I found this. Inkling Wood Press. It's not like Disney put out this book type of book. So it doesn't read as glamorously as that. It kind of goes on all these weird tangents. So at some point, Fox poses that within the mansion, why is it haunted? And he kind of goes off on this little rant that looks like a thing that evokes haunts are horny teens. Like the want of like a sweaty, sex-driven teen evokes spirits. How do you feel about that?
That makes sense to me based on like many horror movies.
Yeah.
Right? Like they're usually the first ones to die.
It's just a weird thing to have in a book about the Haunted Mansion.
That's true. I don't remember any sexy teens.
Right. Well, that's the thing. I think the question is who are you in this story? Are you a magnet to the supernatural?
I am not a sexy teen.
Right. Are you?
And I don't think I ever was.
Things you could be. You could either be a sexy teen that's awakening the spirits by your sexiness, or you could be a conduit for the supernatural.
I see. Yeah.
Or you could just be a hapless Eddie Murphy bystander.
That is always the kind of the preferential. I've always found that aspect of like haunted houses more appealing, where it's like, I need to get out of the rain or whatever. And then you go and you seek shelter. And then they're like, room for one more. Like, welcome to being the 1,000th spirit.
Well, then that poses the question, was this always your destiny? Like, was it inevitable that you would come here and become part of this? Because that implies that you were chosen in a way, and this was always your journey.
Really, you're acceptable to stay.
Yeah.
And does anybody go and they're like, not this one? Move along.
I guess that's most of us that have lived to tell the story of the Haunted Mansion.
True, yeah. If you stayed forever to haunt the Haunted Mansion, call in.
All right. So now we've looked at the old man. We've seen enough old men in our day, so we won't stay
Hard
long
pass
here.
on that, yeah.
And now we enter the Great Hall, which is kind of the main greeting room of like a traditional mansion, but this is our loading area.
Yeah, load up.
Yeah, this is kind of a social space because you've had like this freaky room and now you're kind of back in line again, but you don't mind because it's a short line and it's in this cool room. There's little bats on the banner posts. Aren't there cute little like bat guys? You know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, there are.
I can picture them. Like I know there's one that everybody rubs their hand on, so the brass is like very worn down. Mm-hmm. I can picture that in the ride.
They're atop the stanchions.
Yes.
You know about stanchions.
So we're standing in this room of kind of like flocked wallpaper and like Baroque wainscoting, cool little bat figures. It feels very funeral home-ish. There's spider webs everywhere. And we have one of my favorite parts of any Disney ride, that moving floor that you go on to get on the Doom Buggy.
That's another great way that it's like it keeps it moving because you don't really ever stop.
Right.
Because you just get on it and it's still going. And like you just like get in the thing. Like
yeah, you're always moving. And I think there's little like spray painted bats on it just so you can see that it's moving and it's not just like a black surface you step onto and fall over. And it's strange that more people don't fall on it. It's just moving at exactly the right speed. And it's kind of, like there's enough friction on it.
It's it doesn't feel unsafe.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure they've had to maximize that like over the years.
This is where all the deaths actually happen.
And it's another part where like in the ride, there are just a few times where you see human people who work there who are like in character, but like helping you on or whatever. So.
Right. That's true.
But
right.
They do it in a pretty non-distracting way.
Okay, so we've kind of come down this hall. There's great chandeliers. We are with the rest of the audience here. We pass by a garbage can or two. And then we get to the Doom Buggy, which is a cute little kind of beetle shell container where the sides, like you were saying earlier, the sides come around just enough where like you're kind of boxed off.
Yeah, you're encapsulated in it.
Yeah.
And sort of contained. Like horse blinders, and they also are probably great for roping in that sound.
Yeah, and it's quite comfortable, I would say. Now, of course, you're not supposed to pull the bar down yourself. The ghost host tells you that.
Yeah, he will lower it for you.
An iconic line to put on a t-shirt.
Like, do not do it.
All right, the carriage approaches, he says, to carry you into the boundless realm of the supernatural, where the title of this book comes from, Boundless Realm. Once on board, remain safely seated with your hands and feet, arms, and legs inside. And watch your children, please. Creepy.
Fun fact, that was added much later when they updated the safety protocols throughout the Disney park. So it's a different guy doing the voice for that, but in the same style as Paul Frees. It's very obvious if you know to listen for it.
Oh, okay. And then it does a little bit of Spanish, too.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Which is obviously also not Paul Frees.
Right. He did not know Spanish.
No, I don't know. But I think he was dead at the time that they recorded this.
Okay. So now we come through we're in a long line of Doom Buggies entering what I guess we would call the Portrait Hall. And this is where we meet the Sinister 11 as they become known on the Walt Disney Haunted Mansion Wiki. Now, I do have a chart that shows them all in order. I'm not sure if that is super important, but we can list them by name. And I don't know, are they in the book as well?
Yes, they are in the book as well.
All right, so let's just look at the 11 and kind of rate them. We've got the Opera Glasses Lady. We've got Count Dracula. We've got the Couple. Jack the Ripper. Am I saying them right? Like, is this what you have in
They're not in order in this, and I think I'm missing. I think it doesn't have every single one of them.
Oh, all right. Maybe we can't do this game.
Skip. I like the horse one. That's my favorite.
All right. So something I will note that there is a sailing ship that's crashing into the rocks that I think was pulling a little from the early Mark
Moby
Davis
Dick painting.
Yeah, I think there's like a bit of that in there. You also get a little bit of a headless horseman type of figure in like a chivalrous knight who's rearing back. And then for the Medusa one always threw me off a little because it's a little too like Greek myth to fit. but I do like her.
Yeah, well, and the when she's not Medusa, when she's just the regular painting, she looks like a Sleeping Beauty character to me in a very distracting way.
Yeah.
That the other ones don't have that quality.
Yeah, it's funny how some stuff fits and some doesn't, but I don't know what the rules are as to why it feels that way or not. But for me, that one always kind of threw me off a little bit. And that's okay, because who am I?
The 1000th haunt.
Oh, shit.
Welcome.
I would be so lucky, right? All right, so we move by these flickering portraits that, as you were saying, they're kind of like the old school, like black lighty.
Yeah.
Like they're kind of a mesh in front of something, I think. And when you light it up, it shows through or whatever.
Something,
cool
yeah. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but it's very like on and off.
Yeah.
Because it changes with like the flash of like fake lightning.
Right. And this is all part of that like Magic Castle type of era illusion, right? Like all those type of magicians from back in that day knew how to do all these tricks. And they're putting them to great use here in the Haunted Mansion. Now we enter some great rooms. We get the library and the music room. So the library has another really cool illusion, which is the inverted marble bust, right? Like the greatest ghost writers in history.
Those are super cool.
Yeah. And so like the idea is by inverting the face, the eyes track you across the room.
Yeah, there's something, in the uncanny like optical illusion where no matter where you move, it looks like they're turning their heads to look at you. And they're not, but it looks like it.
You want to know something scary?
Yes.
So I was at a vintage...
They are turning their heads to look at you.
I was at a vintage market last weekend. There was a Jesus portrait that was done in the same style.
That sucks.
Yeah, why would you put that in your home?
Because it's easy to forget that he's always looking at you.
It was really intense. And it was one of those scary things where like seeing it in daylight made it scarier.
So you
somehow.
bought it.
Yeah. And here it is.
Happy birthday.
All right. So the library, I believe on the shelves, there's a couple little bits of like a couple books. There's like 2 books that kind of wobble a little bit because we got the dark and stormy night vibe going, but we haven't really seen anything supernatural going on at this point in the ride, right? We've seen like weird portraits and like a hanging body.
Nothing's been moving when just a normal hanged dead man. 100% fine and normal. Yeah, I think this room has like a rocking chair.
Yeah, it's got
rocking on its own.
Yep, it's got a great little lamp. It's a great little reading room.
It's cozy.
Full of probably a bunch of books bought at like a Florida flea market. Bunch of Encyclopedia Britannicas and stuff, probably. Right?
Nerd shit.
Yeah.
Ghosts don't need to know any of that stuff.
And now we enter the music room, which has a great illusion of a kind of a really wonky shadow piano player, right? Like in the shadow, in the light from the window on the floor is a...
Yeah, the man's playing the piano, but like no one is there. You can clearly see. You have a full unobstructed view and you can see that no one is there playing it.
And now if you play piano, you know that usually your hands are more in front of you.
And not like perfectly like he's T-posing and he's like beep boop boop boop.
Yeah,
like,
we really need to know he's playing that piano. So this is a great dark room, like with this great shadow on the floor. And we've really set the mood of what the mansion is going to provide us with. So there's kind of like this foreshadowing thing. And then suddenly things take a hard turn.
Room.
Right. Into what I guess is described as the endless staircase, right? Like in an inscrutable dark space.
It's very dark. And there's like candles everywhere. And some of them are like candelabras facing up. And some are like inverted. And then this is the room where there are these like light projected footsteps creeping and crawling up stairs.
Yeah, and I guess that comes from a Cloud Coates bit. Like I think originally in an early iteration, they weren't there, and then they put them in based on his art later, I think.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah. But I love this room just thinking about that kind of feeling. Because like with MC Escher, any of these like those immersive illustrators like that, you just want to kind of try to figure out what makes that space work. And that's like a room where you almost...
It's endless.
Yeah, it feels so good. So just all these great little vignettes of strange places. And now we're kind of... Scale has been messed with. What's right up, what's wrong down, all these ideas that we thought we knew. It's all out the friggin' window at this point. And then we get some great Sleeping Beauty style blinking eyes in the darkness. It gives me a very, the old mill type of feeling, like that storm. Like these are classic Disney.
Very cartoon eyes. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Very in the Mark Davis, Raleigh Crump type of feel. Now, here's where we get the first look at the wallpaper. And there's also what's been called the Donald Duck chair. Have you ever heard that phrase that way?
No.
So in this room is just a chair that has a really abstract face-ish design based on a Mark Davis image that's been just called the Donald Duck face.
Wow, okay. It doesn't look like Donald Duck to me.
No.
But why not?
Yeah, I don't know. That's just what it's called. I guess if you look at the top of his head here, that's kind of his hat.
Oh my God, I see it now.
Do you kind of see it? I wouldn't have seen it other than I've heard it called that.
Yes, 100%. As soon as you showed me that, I saw it.
So I don't know if it's supposed to be Donald Duck. Probably not. But
I was looking at the sketch, and I presume that this is the sketch.
Uh-huh.
So I'm going to show Ira, but you guys can't see it. But it does not look quite the same.
Yeah, that's true.
But in the actual image, I think I see it.
I guess it's one of those fun things about the ride where because of the darkness and like the illusions was it intentional or was it not type of thing that you can do with a bit of abstraction, which is fun. So I feel like some of this, the wallpaper, for all its fun silliness, it's definitely trying to evoke the feeling of that scene from The Haunting. But that scene from The Haunting also ties back to another classic horror short story, the Yellow Wallpaper. Have you ever read that story?
I've read the Yellow Wallpaper.
Yeah. So audience, if you're unfamiliar, do you want to tell them about the Yellow Wallpaper?
I really only remember that because I read it in high school. That was high school literature. Yeah, totally. But essentially there's a woman, I don't remember if she's ill or what exactly going on, but she's spending a lot of time shut away in this room, and the peeling yellow wallpaper, like she starts to think that there's like, I don't know if it's supposed to be like people or creatures or something.
There's a witch in it.
Yeah, it's like alive.
Yeah.
It is very creepy, especially because you can't quite tell if this is actually happening or if she's like experiencing a psychosis.
Yeah, it's like one of those classic, I guess like feminist lit 101 type of courses, stories, because it's like first person narrative from this woman's point of view. Her husband has like diagnosed her with like a nervous illness or whatever, like people did back then.
Hysteria.
Yeah. So she's like been holed up in this room for whatever purposes he's decided. And like she slowly starts to fall into this sort of like delusion of this figure in the wall. And it's super creepy and has some great language in it. And I feel like some of that stuff, like all Disney content, is these more interesting ideas in a meaningful context, kind of stripped down and either made fun or just simple and plain and interesting. It's like no one's wearing a yellow wallpaper t-shirt to MoGraph camp, I don't think. But they will wear.
They could.
They could.
Maybe it's time.
All right. So Charlotte Perkins Gilman, look her up. Now we move on from this room of wallpapery illusions. Oh, we see another staple of like gothic horror haunted house stories, like the suit of arms.
Like, oh, is there a dude in there or not? I don't think this one does anything though, right? Because I feel like the like animated suit of armor is very much like a haunted house trope. Yeah. But he doesn't like turn his head or anything. Like,
no, this goes back to that gothic revival like collection of like medieval stuff. We
have this because we like the aesthetic.
Yeah. It like means nothing.
Yeah, my grandfather's armor or whatever.
Right. And it, because it's shaped like a human form, I guess it's cool if it like comes to life. I was reading that in different haunted mansions at different times, the illusion of it has moved in different ways. Like there was a really creepy wobbling version that was so subtle that it was really freaky. Ew. And then there was a more cartoonish one. And then I think there's also just kind of a still one.
A broken one.
And there's also been the replacement of an axe with a spear at times as well. I don't know why, because it was too violent. Who knows?
Spear probably needs a vacation.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes a spear's got to cut loose. And then we get another great illusion, the kind of endless hall with the candelabra floating.
Yeah, I love that. It's so simple. I don't know. There's just something about that feels very, it's just down there. Like you could miss it easily.
Right.
It's just like, ooh, like a ghost is holding this or something.
Yeah, it's one of those spots where this 8-minute ride in this tiny warehouse, not tiny, but like sizable warehouse feels like more infinite, right?
Yeah.
Because like right now, if we looked, in fact, let's fucking ruin the illusion. Let's look at the map.
Whoa.
So
this sucks.
This does suck. I shouldn't have done this, viewers out there. What I have is this kind of deep fried JPEG version of a Disneyland blueprint that somebody scanned and uploaded a million different times. I don't know who's supposed to look at this. Probably somebody from like a Eli Roth Saw movie. It's like hanging on the wall as you're like tortured because it's impossible to see what's going on. The magic is gone. But you can see like where the rooms kind of fold back in on themselves and kind of weave and intertwine within themselves. And it just kind of makes you appreciate the illusion, but also ruins it. So like the endless hallway, it actually goes just back behind the piano room that we saw not that long ago. And it sucks that
and it's not endless.
No, it turns out there actually is an end.
And it's not that far.
No, you could literally walk down it in like a couple seconds if you wanted to.
Well, I don't think they would let me do that.
No, you would be kicked out of the park.
Like, you cannot do that.
Also this book, Boundless Realm, Fox Nolte, he worked at the Haunted Mansion for a while. So he has a bunch of
cred.
Random antidotes of like sneaking in. So I guess on your last day, you ride the ride one last time and you take off your work shoes and you throw them into the attic at the end. So like people that have to keep working at the mansion have to clean them out from time to time.
Oh, okay. I was like, they just all are up there all the time?
I think they get taken out, but that's like a thing that people do, I guess. Yeah.
I did notice when I was on the Yeti roller coaster last time I was there that a lot of people have been taking their hair ties off and throwing them at the top of the mountain. So
that's really,
there's a lot of them up there when I was there.
Kind of breaks the illusion.
Yeah. Like, Everest has a lot of trash on it, but not like everybody's hair ties.
All right. So endless conversation about the endless hallway. And we move on. Our doom buggy spins to reveal a great room. So I think we're in the conservatory now at this point. Like it's kind of a greenhouse-ish room.
Yeah, it's the one that like to me it looks like the Addams Family's greenhouse.
Oh yeah,
the outside.
Totally.
So that's why I always associate it with that, like their little plant room.
Maybe I love the conservatory idea, like these space that's all windows.
Yeah.
It's just a nice relief after the room with no windows and no doors. God,
yeah. I thought I was going to have to kill myself.
And now in this room, we meet a couple key figures. First, we meet a raven who may be the florist because there's a lot of kind of like funeral type floral arrangements going on. And a raven who originally in early concept art was intended to be the host, which would have been fun.
Oh, interesting.
I guess. I mean, this is like an early idea, someone just wrote it down.
I do like that. Yeah. But I guess then he wouldn't have been able to kill himself and be a dead body in the room.
Oh, a little hung raven.
So yeah,
hanging by a tiny noose.
Same.
Yeah. I guess a raven couldn't, like with the hollow bones, like do they weigh enough? Can you really?
Oh, probably not.
Yeah.
All he would have to do is fly into the window or the wall.
Like so many birds. Now we kind of get to a classic dark ride, going back to the Pretzel amusement company that made the scary first dark ride, scary, funny laugh ride. The coffin with the lid being shaken is a pretty standard, like.
This feels hokey to me, straight up. Like, I would describe all of this stuff as hokey, generally speaking, because I just think that's accurate. But this one is just like, he doesn't come out. Nothing happens. There's just ghost, like, skeleton hands lifting up a coffin lid, and that's it. And it reminds me of, like, haunted houses that you would see as a kid, like, that your community puts on or whatever.
Yeah.
So but it's fun and it's a well decorated room. It's probably the cheapest gag in the whole thing.
Yeah, it's like the best room with like kind of the lamest thing at its centerpiece. But the lighting is cool. Like there's a light coming up and you can see the nails being pulled out of the lid of the coffin. Again, another kind of Poe buried alive type of thing.
Well, even like outside, quote unquote, like you can see like trees in the mist of the night, like through the window. So
in early drafts of the story, the idea is in the walkthrough version of the Haunted Mansion, as you arrived and you were led in, a storm begins. I would actually kind of love a version of this. And they do it in... I think there's a version of like the Pirates ride in Tokyo or somewhere where a storm builds throughout the course of the ride. I would love a Haunted Mansion where like weather is like more of an element.
That's cool.
So that would be cool. But yeah,
take note, Imagineers.
Yeah, if you got any, you need any plans. But it does look great just through the window. That's nice. So now here's where we get the question of like who's awakening these spirits for the first time, because now like we are seeing the dead arise.
Yeah, they're popping.
And at this coffin, the ghost host says, what does he say? They've been like dying to meet you. This one can hardly contain himself or something like that, right?
Ghost host.
And I think actually the character in the coffin, according to the transcript that Kaylin and I have up here, he's saying like, let me out of here. That's funny. Okay. So keep that in mind, listeners. Like who's evoking these spirits? That's a question you need to be asking yourself.
I think it's Madame Leota.
You think so? That is one interpretation.
She's all like, hey, spirits, what's up? That's kind of her whole deal.
So now we come backwards. Now this is great use of the Doom buggy, where like they flip us around and we're kind of like we're backing up into this space. Like it happens a couple times. I think that's cool to kind of like look at things as they're passing. So we get bulging doors. We get fingers coming around the doorknobs.
The door thing is so creepy. Actually, that stuff is whack.
The bulging door. You need to watch The Haunting. When it happens in that scene, it's like super subtle because the idea was that you were seeing it in like film projection. But like watching it on your television, it's like very upsetting because you're like, oh my God.
Ew.
Like, yeah,
okay.
It's great. And I feel like we get a pretty good bulging door in the Haunted Mansion ride itself. And then we get the iconic clock, the 13-hour clock. And this is a Raleigh Crump.
Wow, classic Raleigh Crump.
This is, have you looked at the Raleigh Crump art for his proposed Museum of the Weird attraction?
No.
Oh, really? Shit.
That was such a new thing for me to learn about.
Yeah, you got to get that Raleigh Crump book because this is some fun stuff. We'll just pull up the wiki of it. But it's got like this image.
Oh my God, yes, I did see that.
Right.
I didn't know that's what it was for, but yeah, I love it. Almost like Looney Tunes-ish to me.
Oh, totally. Yeah, like it's
like
very...
the color is so bright and strange.
Yeah, the pink walls is very Looney Tunes.
And then like lime green, like neon lime accents.
So for those who don't know, the Haunted Mansion clock, which is this creepy demonic clock where it has wobbly hands and it's kind of spinning around and only has one number on it. It's 13. This idea comes from a proposal Raleigh Crump, the Imagineer, had for an attraction called the Museum of the Weird, which was like definitely rooted in Barnum and Bailey sideshow attractions, where it's like all kinds of cultish imagery and kind of wax museum-ish stuff. And he built a scale model of it to kind of pitch the idea. And it's got all these great little like figures of really upsetting looking, drippy skull, melty body coffins and skeleton figures. And it was deemed like too weird.
That's too bad.
It's like a little too occult-ish in its imagery. But some of the ideas like did kind of make it into the
God, that's
Haunted
horrifying.
Mansion. Yeah, Caitlin right now is looking at a figure called the Candleman.
I don't like it.
He's basically just like a waxy...
He's a melting guy that's like full of holes. He's got holes in him. He's drippy. It's not... I don't care for it.
Here, let's go a little deeper. How do you like this?
I really like that.
So we've got a little kind of sideshow circus wagon.
It's super colorful.
You could live in that thing.
Yeah, that's vibrant. It's a tiny house.
Yeah. And then we go further down the rabbit hole of like kind of vampira type of characters and whatnot.
He had a lot of ideas.
Yeah. And they were too weird. And all he gets is his clock.
Sorry, Raleigh.
All right. So check out the Museum of Weird concept art if you have time. Now, last time I rode the Haunted Mansion, it actually, you know how sometimes it breaks down and the ghost host is like, please stand still.
Everybody chill for a minute. Yeah.
We, my wife Maura and I, we stopped right dead on looking at that clock, which was cool at first. But then you realize why it's important. This is an 8-minute ride and it needs to keep moving because pretty quickly you're like, we're just kind of like in a dusty warehouse.
Yeah, like literally nothing happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because like the music stops. The lights didn't come on or anything. It wasn't that intense.
Yeah, it stays dark in my experience. But yeah, it's just like the ride is over.
Yeah.
But you are still there.
So after the clock, now we get to kind of the end of the first act, and we enter the transition, which is Madame Leota's seance room. So we see a floating head in a chandelier. This is Madame Leota herself. And if we kind of break down this seance room, going back to kind of like the themes that inspired this ride as a whole, we have the idea of spiritualism as kind of like an industry and a trend. And that's like a big thing actually in upstate New York as well. So tying back to like the origins of this type of figure that Madame Leota represents, there's this story, and it's talked about in the Boundless Realm book. In 1848 in Hydesville, New York, which is near Rochester, this is kind of the origins of spiritualism as a trend. 3 sisters, known as the Fox sisters, decided to play a massive prank on their mother to convince her that they were like possessed by otherworldly spirits. And this joke goes on for about a whole year, where they're doing all kinds of weird things. Like they're disjoining their fingers and creating like bumps under fabric that they say are like spirits like speaking through them as like some kind of conduit. And they do this like rapping on chairs and making little kind of like Morse code basically type of like communication
shave and a haircut.
Exactly. And this is freaking out the mom, and I guess it all kind of culminates in this like April Fool's gag, but they don't let up, and they carry this on because this is how they're making a reputation for themselves. Like the townsfolk in Hydesville begin to acknowledge this power of theirs, and then they kind of begin to capitalize it as they get more and more famous. And it just happens to align with sort of like a want and need, I guess, maybe for answers for questions, like this idea of spiritualism connecting with the dead in times of war, or like dark times in urban settings amidst the Industrial Revolution, where like, you know, there's not a lot of regulations for this new industry and people are just dying left and right in like manufacturing fires and whatnot. So the idea that like people being conduits for communicating with the dead like is really appealing to people's culture at the time. And also commercial photography and the double exposure gimmick and all these like con artist tricks you can play on unsuspecting patrons who, you know, yearn to connect with a lost one. I think Madame Leota kind of represents this whole era in this. And she's kind of posed as a bit of a con artist, I guess, in a way. I don't know. What do you think? Is she...
That's a great question. I don't know. I always sort of took it seriously, but I always felt like she was kind of random to have her here.
I think
like, oh, by the way, she's here.
So Mark Davis puts her in a crystal ball, which is posed as one of the iconic con artist props, because the crystal ball isn't really like a thing. Like tarot, there are things that are like connected to spiritualism, but the ball itself is an iconic con artist thing. So I think that's why it maybe is like a bit.
Crystal balls are real.
That's true.
Absolutely real.
So there's this great kind of idea that, you know, our Imagineer, who is well-versed in the illusions, Yale Gracie, descends from this line of like Houdini type figures, that part of their bit is to debunk the con artists. And a lot of those con artists or people that are making a living off this idea of spiritualism were women, because it was like an industry that women could like work in. Yeah. You know, like if you heard that bit, and actually that goes even further into upstate New York. Like if the town of, what is it? I wrote this down. Edit this together so it sounds smart. Lilydale. It's a little town outside of Buffalo. And this, to this day, is this sort of hub of spiritualism where like people go and go to seminars.
And seance.
Yeah. So it's kind of like Camp Mograph, but for like spiritualists.
For ghost mediums.
Yeah. So this is all upstate New York stuff. And it's all cool.
You heard it here first.
Yeah. So I just think it's interesting to have the Imagineers like creating illusions, using the history of illusions that by people that were trying to debunk ideas that the Haunted Mansion represents. It's just like a weird kind of mashup of like different aspects of culture and magic and creepy stuff. Anyway, my brain's starting to hurt, but we're doing great.
Like,
how you doing over there?
I'm a little tired.
Okay, we can move on faster. I'll stop diverging into history and references.
It's interesting though. Oh my God, there's so much of this I didn't know.
Okay.
Edit that out too because I'm very smart.
No, you're doing
and I
great.
know a lot.
I mean, you don't own. If you owned Boundless Realms by Fox Nolte,
Oh, I would know so much.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah,
Kaylin is gesturing to have me pass her the book.
permanently.
All right. So long, Madame Leota. We know that the actor who portrayed you passed away. And I believe the daughter, actually, I've heard her interviewed in like Disney podcasts. Like she is an Imagineer or something, right? Have you heard that?
She is in the Imagineering series on Disney Plus.
Oh, okay.
Too, and they talk about that connection and how like she'll ride the ride with her kids and be like, that's like my mom, like, or what,
oh,
you know,
yeah.
it's kind of cool.
That's kind of a version of your mom's story, but it would be like if your mom was in the ride.
If my mom was actually a ghost.
Yeah, just frozen in time. That's a weird thing to think about. Having your mom be...
It super is. I have to imagine, like, what's it like to be a kid and you go on this ride and you're like, oh. But I guess their voice was a different person.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I learned that here in this book.
So is the daughter of the voice or the daughter of the face?
The daughter of the face.
Oh, okay.
Who was named Leota Toombs. And the voice was Eleanor Audley, who was also... I don't know if she was an Imagineer, but she was a Disney... Yeah, she was the wicked stepmother in Cinderella and Maleficent, I guess.
Really?
Allegedly, according to this text.
Okay. And now to be clear, you're looking at a different book.
This book, yes, is The Haunted Mansion, Imagineering a Disney Classic by Jason Searle, or Sorrell.
That's up to you, listener.
It's for you to decide. Jason has no say in it.
Now, we pass out of Madame Leota's room. We come around the bend. Like if you're kind of imagining the ride, we circle around her seance table, which is very cool. And behind her are all these whimsical instruments.
I love the floating instruments. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's very kind of like evocative of like Fantasia and even like Silly Symphonies type of.
Oh, there's like a harp,
Disney
like a
history.
giant harp is one of them.
Yeah.
It's a nice visual.
And it's a dark room. Like after being in the hallway, there's so much less to look at in here. It's very specific.
When it's like quiet, because the focus is supposed to be on Madame Leota and her weird little chants. And they're like creepy in the same way that like 50s horror stuff was creepy. And that voice is like that. But it's also kind of silly where she's talking about like Halloween ghosts, like use your tambourine to like, you know, show us that you're out there kind of stuff. So it's like very tongue in cheek.
Oh, actually,
and playful.
If you pull up the transcript, we get some of her lines.
Oh. Can you read me off a few bars?
Yeah. Serpents and spiders, tail of a rat, call in the spirits, wherever they're at.
Wherever they're at. Yeah, goblins and ghoulies from last Halloween awaken the spirits with your tambourine.
Creepies and crawlies, toads in a pond, let there be music from regions beyond.
She's just into the music thing.
Yeah.
Wizards and witches, wherever you dwell, give us a hint by ringing a bell. It's not like a lot.
No.
It's a little bell. Play the triangle.
All right, so now we enter the Grand Hall. And this is like, I guess, the centerpiece of the whole frickin' thing. So, if you've never been on the Haunted Mansion, I don't know, I mean, I guess just keep listening. But you're up on the balcony, basically, and looking down
into a
stage
ballroom
space. Yeah. And it's massive. Like, you can't see the ceiling. I think it just goes up and out into the darkness, which is very cool. The windows, I think, extend outside of your view. And it's a practical reason that we're raised up, because the illusion that we are going to see is a room of props and furniture, but the characters are being like, how's it done? It's like, I
don't quite know. It's sort of like a glass and mirror thing.
Yeah.
Where ultimately you see, I want to say that it's like, there are figures underneath you. I could be wrong about this. This is a very
sounds right so
potentially flawed summation of how this works. But you're on top of this balcony, so directly underneath you, there are physical statues of these ghosts. Like the physical animatronics are underneath the floor, like on the level below you.
Yeah.
And I think there's a mirror, and then in the room, there's like a pane of glass. So ultimately, there's a reflection bouncing from the actual ghost figures onto this thing of glass so that you can see them, but it's like on a layer of transparency so that it looks like actually they're just sort of, really you could be like, they're like holograms in there, but to make them look ghostly. I could be completely wrong about how that works, but I know the glass thing is a part of it.
Yeah, totally. And the scale of it, like this pane of glass must be massive because there is no seams anywhere. You can't see what. Yeah,
there's no breakages. So it's just like there's like a row of like dancing, like ballroom dancers in the back room. There's like quite a few of them. And like the table is full of ghosts. They're like dining and etc.
I believe they're at like a birthday party at this haunted mansion. I think it's different in different mansions, but I think this is a birthday party.
Because there's that candle, like all the candles on the cake light up.
Right. And there's a great fireplace with the green fire, which is just
the ghostly fire. It's great. It's like warping and like, I don't know, getting sucked up the chimney, basically. It's really evocative.
Yeah, green Disney fire, kind of like Sleeping Beauty.
It's like very like otherworldly. And of course, all the little spirits that are like coming out of the organ. They're like rotating in front of the organ pipes.
Right. Fun fact about that organ. It used to be Captain Nemo's organ from the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea ride.
Wow.
Pretty cool, huh?
Wow. Money saving.
Yeah. They just brought it in here and redecorated. I guess it's like less steampunky looking.
It's more haunted now.
Yeah. So we've got a room of people dining, hanging out, dancing figures spinning around, and I think there's even a guy hanging on the chandelier.
Yeah, there is a guy who's like sitting up there, standing up there.
Do you have the book open to that page? Like
I do, but
he's one of the haunts that actually has a name for himself. I mean, who cares? But also, whatever. We're here.
Is it the Hatbox Ghost? Because I know that's like a famous one, but I don't know which one that is.
No, he is just called Hatbox Ghost, and I think he comes up later.
Yeah, I don't know where he is. It's not made clear.
That'll be in our follow-up episode, Haunted Mansion Part 2, where
the Hatbox Ghost. Boogaloo.
Okay. Well, anyway.
Oh, Pickwick.
Yeah, that's him. Pickwick. That's a fun name. That was worth it.
Yeah, Pickwick.
All right. So we move out of the grand hall, and now we enter kind of, I guess maybe for me, the most boring part of the ride, because I've cleaned out attics. I've been to like many, yard sales, estate sales. That's basically what the attic is. It's just a bunch of stuff people bought at Florida garage sales and jammed in a room. Also, there's a lot of shoes, as we noted earlier, from like previous employees of the Haunted Mansion.
Just piling up year after year.
And there's a little bit of a narrative that you can kind of follow. First of all, there's props. A lot of them are kind of left over from Constance, who is the bride. That's her name. From her past life. And according to the book Caitlin's looking at, she's been married, I think, 6 times. There's a page in that book where it shows all the portraits that we see scattered throughout the attic that gives a quick little breakdown of each of her marriages. Because as you're going through the attic, you'll see a portrait of Constance and her husband. And as you move around the portrait, the husband's head fades away. Yep. And she's standing with a headless figure. The stories of their lives are not that interesting, but she does kind of move up the ranks. I believe she starts with just sort of like a lowly farm boy is her first husband, and then moves up through men of industry.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. Because the last guy is the owner of the mansion.
Oh, what's his name?
George.
Oh, that's boring.
No last name.
And she even does kind of like she strays from the path and marries some like sort of more exotic, like royalty from like some other far off land.
Just that there's no name.
Yeah.
It's just the Marquis. And so she's known as the Black Widow Bride.
Yeah.
For unknown reasons that we can't possibly fathom.
Now, the bride, we get a good look at her, and this is, like you were pointing out earlier, there's some illusions that have shifted and changed and been updated. I think the bride herself that we see right at the far end of the attic, her illusion has changed. There's been times where she's been like a well-lit mannequin with like a painted face, and she's kind of a whitely figure. I think there's been times where she's had like no face, but I think at this point she's like a projection, some high-tech projection. So I think the idea here with the story is that we've been drawn into the mansion. We've come through. Madame Leota has awakened all the spirits. We've seen them. We've moved up into the attic for whatever reason. In the classic haunted house style, we've gone deeper into the house instead of getting out when things get weird. And we see the ghost at the far edge of the attic, and we get so scared that we fall out the attic window because the doom buggy like spins around.
Yeah.
And then we're like, whoa.
Yeah, we get out of We're like, fuck this, bye.
And now we're in Act 3.
We're at the party.
Yeah, we're at the big jamboree where like the song kicks in fully.
Yeah, all the ghosts are singing. It's like a whole festival, and they were just jamming out.
You know what I love that the thing I love most at Eddie Disney Ride is the moment in Peter Pan where you like exit out, you come around the corner and you're flying over the city. This is kind of like that. It doesn't feel as magical, but you get a good look out over everything at first, right? You're kind of entering this big room.
It's huge.
Yeah.
Like, it's huge.
It's a massive showroom.
It feels like, like we're outside. We're out of doors now.
Yeah.
And a lot of stuff is happening, and that's fun.
And we see kind of a Night on Bald Mountain type of spirits kind of like flying up through the sky, just these like little projected spirits. And I always wanted the dog to have a name. We first come around to Bend where we see like a groundskeeper, like a real human who's got
He's
like
the only one really that you see.
He's got a faithful dog. But the dog's really worried, and I don't like when dogs get worried.
Well, yeah, he's right to be worried. Like, shit is popping off. This place is full of dead people.
All right, so Kaylin and we enter the graveyard jamboree. We see haunts aplenty. There's kind of blacklight, Spencer Gift style musicians.
Yeah, these are the ones where they're not like projections or hologram type imagery of any kind. They're like illuminated actual animatronics, but it's very obvious, like these are the ghosts.
Yeah, it's more Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah, they're like
style,
way
right?
more cartoonish.
Yes.
A lot of them are very round, I feel, just portly, I would say.
This is like the Mark Davis Expo or something, right? Because there's also kinds of other cute gags. So, and you can see it. It's cool the way they do the lighting because the ghosts are kind of black light, but then there's a couple owls that are real owls. And then there's like a couple cats that are sitting on the wall and they have like more warm, natural light on them.
Yeah, it's like the ghosts look like ghosts. They're lit so that they stand out as if they are ectoplasm.
Now, here's my least favorite part of the whole Haunted Mansion ride, which is, these are probably Imagineers. There's probably some in-joke, but there's like 5 busts of like singing men kind of doing a barbershop quartet type of thing. Like thin, mustache, Vincent Price type of guys. And they're just they're making too many faces.
Yeah, I almost think, I don't dislike this, but I agree. And I think it's like they're moving at a higher frame rate than the rest of the stuff.
Yeah, it's too clear or something.
Madame Leota is kind of in this rigid sort of way where I feel like she's holding her head extremely still.
Yeah.
And like her eye, she looks around a lot, but her face is not moving. And I don't know this just feels like guys going like, bah, like at the camera.
Yeah, it's too much. I don't like it. I don't know if it's one of those updates from like the early aughts or something.
It does. It also feels modern.
Yeah. It's funny how I feel like these days, paying tribute to like an aesthetic of the past, like past filmmaking or anything, it can be done so spot on. But there's been about 20 years of building up to getting to that where, like, for example, Johnny Depp in The Pirates, right? That would not be made today, that choice to bring in a character, an actor from a movie.
Yeah.
The goal should be to preserve what the ride looks like and elaborate on that, not like bring in this outside force, right?
Yeah, it's like I don't know that people wanted the draw of like the Black Pearl to go to
it doesn't
that
hold
ride,
up
because that's
so it's like this part of the Haunted Mansion is the one sort of like weak spot where it's like it doesn't quite fit.
Take these guys out. No offense to these guys.
Yeah, get them out. But now, luckily, we cut back around the corner and we see a bunch more mannequins of graveyard figures doing all kinds of great fun.
Some of them are kissing. I'm just joking. That doesn't happen.
Are they holding hands?
I mean, maybe, but not that I've noticed.
Yeah. There's like a little skeleton arm sort of poking up too, which is cute.
He has like a coffee cup in his hand or something.
Yeah, he's got a little tea time.
I love that.
There's a mummy for some reason. Seems
That's a
out
haunt.
of context. Yeah.
I mean, he's a dead guy. Could be a ghost.
I'm surprised they don't indulge more of like Universal monster type stuff. Like we don't really get a Dracula or
there's
like
no werewolf like popping. It's only in the portraits.
Yeah.
At the beginning, and then the rest of it is straight up like this is a ghost. But and I guess that's something that adds to the charm, which we've kind of mentioned a couple times, that like the pastiche nature of this sort of makes it what it is. But it like the Haunted Mansion doesn't necessarily feel super cohesive. It does because the vibes are. It's just there's so many different ideas and like decades of work that went into it.
Yeah.
That it's like you get stuff like that where they had literally like paintings of a Dracula, of like a vampire at the beginning or whatever. And he's just like, by the time you get to the end, they're like, no, it's a ghost thing.
It's true. Like really the music just holds it all together, I guess, right?
Yeah. And it's like, it's haunted house themed.
Right.
So it's like, I think they were like, you can have the imagery of these spooky things, but we don't necessarily need to have them in it.
And so now we've kind of come through the graveyard, and I'm not sure where we are in this last little stretch. Are we going through like a sewer tunnel? We enter under an arch, like a stone arch. And clearly we're just leaving the ride, obviously, so they have to do something.
Yeah.
But we're going through a tunnel of some sort, and we see the hitchhiking ghosts.
Whomst we must beware of.
And these are your boys from the poster.
Yeah, I love these guys.
Yeah.
There's something about them. They're all just very distinctive. Like one's very short, one's medium, like one's clearly the tall and skinny one, even though he's like, they're all hunched over. So there's not like a massive height disparity.
Yeah. And I think we also get into the Hatbox ghost scenario here, because one of the guys is carrying a case with like a drape over it. I don't know and he has a hat on. I guess two of them do.
A lot of them have hat. Yeah, I don't know.
So the thing with the Hatbox ghost, I'm sure somebody knows more about this that's listening. I hope some fans.
Whomst knows about this? Which one is the Hatbox ghost?
So the story with the Hatbox ghost, it's a character with a very demonic kind of sunken skull face. He's got a big cloak on, kind of a Jekyll and
I
Hyde
found him.
type of look. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's carrying a hat box. And at some point, the illusion is that his face disappears and goes in the box. Mm-hmm. Now, the idea was it was an illusion built for the Haunted Mansion. There are notes about it. There are drawings, but he never appears in the Haunted Mansion. He was either put in early on and taken out because he didn't work, which I think is the case.
Yeah, he was taken out very shortly.
But they kept the mold to make him. And I think his mold is actually the mold used for like another character as well. So because this story kind of, carried on through Haunted Mansion history, they decided at some point to rebuild the character and actually put him in. And I think he might be in the attic. I can't remember. But
we'll have to check when we go.
Yeah, he's back now. And we're leaving actually right after we finish recording.
Oh, okay. Hell yeah. I got to call in to work.
I already called in for you. It's all set.
Caitlin's not showing. Like, who are you? Who is this person?
All right. So now we get a great little bit. We pass the hitchhiking ghost. They're kind of like, oh, actually, we have the transcript. Let's look at the dialogue here. Ah, there you are. And just in time, there's a little matter I forgot to mention. Beware the hitchhiking ghosts. They have selected you to fill our quota, and they'll haunt you until you return. And at this point, we get one last, well, not one last, there's one more after this, but a penultimate illusion where our doom buggies face mirrors, supposedly, and we see ourselves.
Alleged mirrors.
Caitlin and Ira, in that order. And then and between us,
a new friend.
An unholy ghost sits with us for all eternity.
And I love this one because, like, it's a different one for each doom buggy. I assume there's 3 options for each of the 3 hitchhiking ghosts that you see.
Right.
I'm not sure, but like, so depending on which, you could ride it again and have a different ghost experience at the end part.
Right. Which begs the question, next time you get on, does the ghost return into the mix and you pull out a new one, or like you're not collecting them each time you go? Do you get a
really good, because I would have had at least 3 by now.
Yeah.
Huh.
Caitlin's looking around just to make sure.
I don't know, man.
Well, we'll probably never find out. And the one thing I don't like, which you can see in this Attractions 360 video, is I want the ghost when, like, one of the ghosts does a little bit, he kind of like jumps up and like sits down really fast. just have them move like they're animatronics. Don't have them do Yoda in like Attack of the Clones type of jumping around the room.
I think that like I understand adding the hovering to Madame Leota, I think is fine because it still looks authentic. But yeah, I do, not to be all like hoity-toity about it, but it's so jarring to see something that's like made with technology we have today and injected into this like historical artifact, essentially. It's like, maybe don't. Like, we don't need that.
It like loses the physics of like, it doesn't have the weight of an actual object when you put it up against a thing that like is a physical thing, you know, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, it's like, and it needs to, if it's going to live in the same, this is such a Disney thing. It's like, if it's going to live in the same world, it should move in the same way.
Yeah, exactly.
I've spoken. I'm the director of Imagineering.
That's Caitlin's new rule.
Well, how about it? Well, so we're out of the Jamboree. We've taken our ghost. We have secured our ghost to bring back to upstate New York with us forever until the next time we go back. So as we're proceeding to the exit, what are your thoughts? How did you feel about this experience that we had?
As much as I love cartoon feelings, I also equally love theme park ride feelings, I think. And not for all of them. There's something like special about the Haunted Mansion. I think, again, this always comes down to what's been documented well. And the Haunted Mansion is such a deep dive. Like you like the book you have is a great Disney banner book of like the artistry and the craft of like 20 years of thinking and planning compressed into this great like picture book with some great paragraphs about it. And then over here, I have this madman's rambling about his life obsession with the Haunted Mansion.
Thank you, Fox Nolty.
Yeah, and it's a great book. I'm not making fun of it, but it is clearly like there's a lot. I mean, there's about 40 pages.
It's a boundless realm. What do you want?
There's like 8 pages on the elevator mechanism, describing the color of it. And
I love that, actually. I'm looking forward to purchasing this book.
So it's a great book. Everyone should buy it, and you'll see why I love the Haunted Mansion as much as I do, because there's not a lot of creative projects that people have spent so much time being fascinated with. And that echo of people loving a thing and bringing their own creative thought to that just creates like a magical world that goes so much beyond the ride. Like you and I can sit here and get exhausted for 2.5 hours talking about this thing because there's so much to talk about.
And it's like, it's kind of crazy when you think about it that we didn't even ever see the original conception of it.
No.
Like we can't really, there's no way to see that. So we have our experience. Like it's just something cool that something has been like loved and pursued for so long that even if we don't like all of it, like that they still change it sometimes. And then even they started doing like the Nightmare Before Christmas re-theme for Christmas. It's like, it's really nice that they want people to keep enjoying it, but they do add to it in very subtle ways generally.
Yeah.
Or just fun ways to like make it interesting.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like they want to, and it's because everybody wants it, right? It's not because they aspire to just make more Haunted Mansion stuff and make it more interesting. It's like, this is what people want.
Yeah, it's a relationship with their audience.
And when you go to the other parks, so I've been to the Disneyland Paris, the Haunted Mansion, it's got a different twist because it's like a different audience. Like, instead of going into the graveyard outside of the mansion, you go underground. You like literally go into Dante's hell, but it's also like the setting isn't upstate New York. It's like a Western theme because it's, what is it? Thunder Mountain Railroad, like Mesa,
interesting.
You know, like that whole setting. So you're kind of like below that. So you're getting like shootouts with like gnarly skeletons. It's a lot darker. It's not very Mark Davison. It's great. And the Pirates ride is like that too. It's darker. And then in that book Caitlin has, they show Phantom Manor, which I think is the one in Tokyo, just because of like the relationship there with spirits is very different than like the American relationship. It's not about like Victorian Gothic revival or like haunted houses or Vincent Price. It's very different. So there it's mystical. Yeah. So it's interesting. I think like if I was a kid and I love Disney, coming across those little things like can, in a weirdly suddenly serious way, like teach you about how world cultures are kind of different and how we can have similar ideas, but our cultures change how we relate to them. Like the idea of a ghost, depending where you are in the world, that concept has different meanings.
Yeah.
And that's just so cool.
Yeah.
That the park adapts to that, in ways that are trying to be sensitive and empathetic towards that. So how do you feel I'm done.
I'm terrified.
I'm tired. What are you're tired of the Haunted Mansion more so than ever?
No, I just, no, I'm being haunted right now by my co-host. I mean, I'm hot still, but yeah, I enjoyed this haunting. I think I'll stay.
Oh, you're going to stay. Well, I think, all right, even if you're going to stay, I think we need to like pass by your mom's least favorite figure of the Haunted Mansion.
Yeah, I'll walk you out.
Okay, yeah. So we're leaving the ghosts, the hitchhiking ghost. Of course, we're bringing one with us, but the last moment of the Haunted Mansion is our doom buggy's turn, and we face the darkness as we're about to enter out into the real world. Boring. And we see like this little urn and a little kind of stage space with a tiny spotlight as if it's a tiny stage for tiny figures.
And there stands a small woman, absolutely terrifying, the most scariest part of the ride. And she says, "Hurry back, hurry back." Beverly, don't listen to this. Be sure to bring your death certificate if you decide to join us. I don't have my death certificate. Shit. Make final arrangements now. We've been dying to have you.